All right, thank you, Pam. Welcome to the Amherst Planning Board meeting of November 16th, 2022. My name is Doug Marshall, and as the chair of the Amherst Planning Board, I am calling this meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and is available live stream via Amherst Media. Minutes are being taken. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, and extended again by the state legislature on July 16th, 2022. This planning board meeting, including public hearings, will be conducted via remote means using the Zoom platform. The Zoom meeting link is available on the meeting agenda posted on the town website's calendar listing for this meeting, or go to the planning board webpage and click on the most recent agenda, which lists the Zoom link at the top of the page. No in-person attendance of the public is permitted. However, every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the meeting in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship or despite best efforts, we will post an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the Town of Amherst website. Board members, I will take a roll call. When I call your name, unmute yourself, answer affirmatively, and return to mute. Bruce Coldham.
Here.
Tom Long.
Present.
Andrew McDougall.
Present.
I, Doug Marshall, I'm present. Janet McGowan.
Here.
Johanna Newman.
Here.
And Karen Winter.
Here.
Thank you all. Board members, if technical issues arise, we may need to pause temporarily to fix the problem and then continue the meeting. If the discussion needs to pause, it will be noted in the minutes. Please use the raise hand function to ask a question or make a comment. I will see your request and call on you to speak. After speaking, remember to remute yourself. To the public. The general public comment item is reserved for public comment regarding items not on tonight's agenda. Please be aware the board will not respond to comments during general public comment period. Public comment may also be heard at other times during the meeting when deemed appropriate. Please indicate you wish to make a comment by clicking the raise hand button when public comment is solicited. If you have joined the Zoom meeting using a telephone, please indicate you wish to make a comment by pressing *9 on your phone. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name and address and put yourself back into mute when finished speaking. Residents can express their views for up to 3 minutes or at the discretion of the planning board chair. If a speaker does not comply with these guidelines or exceeds their allotted time, their participation may be disconnected from the meeting. All right, so the first item on our agenda for this evening, and we're starting this item at 6:37 p.m., is our review and approval of minutes. However, I don't believe we have any minutes available for review tonight. So unless the staff wants to contradict me, I think we'll just go ahead and move on to the second item. All right, seeing some nodding heads. So the second item is the public comment period. So at this time, members of the public, if you would like to make any comments on items that are not on tonight's agenda, this is the time to do that. You will be invited to make comments on items that are on the agenda later in the meeting when we discuss that topic, each topic. At this time, I only see one participant as a public attendee. That's Jonathan Gerfine, and I believe he's waiting for his topic to come up later in the meeting. I don't see that he wants to make any public comment at this time. So we'll move right along to item 3, the zoning bylaw public hearing. The time now is 6:38, and so the intro. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding the zoning bylaw for food and drink establishments, Article 3, use regulations, Article 5, accessory uses, Article 11, administration and enforcement, and Article 12, definitions. To see if the town will vote to amend Article 3, use regulations, to delete existing use categories in section 3.352.0, Class 1, restaurant, cafe, lunchroom, cafeteria, or similar place, section 3.352.1, Class 2, restaurant or bar, and section 3.352.2, Class 3, drive-up restaurant, and to add the following use categories, section 3.352.0, restaurant, cafe, bar with food or other similar food/beverage establishment where food is available at all times. Section 3.352.1, bar with no food served. Section 3.352.2, nightclub and nightclub. And section 3.352.3, any of the above food or drink establishments with occupant capacity of more than 250 occupants, and to add standards and conditions for these uses, and to amend Article 5, accessory uses, sections 5.041, 5.042, and 5.043, to allow seasonal outdoor dining as an accessory use to a principal use authorized by section 3.3, to allow outdoor furnishings associated with such use to remain in place between November 1 and April 1, as long as the use is active and operational, to remove the prohibition on outdoor heating and cooling devices, and to allow live or pre-recorded entertainment as an accessory use to a principal use authorized by section 3.3, and to delete reference to drive-in restaurants, and to amend Article 11, administration and enforcement, to rearrange the paragraphs describing when site plan review is not required, and to clarify the requirements and process for granting administrative approval, and to amend Article 12, definitions, by clarifying section 12.05, bar, and by deleting section 12.11, drive-up restaurant, and any associated renumbering that may be necessary. This hearing is continued from November 2nd, 2022. All right, do we have any board member disclosure? I do not see any. Chris, do you intend to make the application, or will this be Nate tonight?
This will be Nate, and I think we'll be accompanied by Rob Mora eventually.
Okay. So take it away, Nate.
Sure. Andrew had just raised his hand. I don't know.
Oh, okay, Andrew.
Oh, thanks, Doug. Thanks, Nate. Yeah, I just want to make sure it says more than 250 occupants, but that number's changing, right?
Right. So the original
We keep the
legal
language
ad
from
is
the
the
original.
original proposal. And so, right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nate Malloy, a planner with the town. I was going to share my screen. I think that might be the easiest way. That's interesting. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. What's shown in blue is what was changed for the November 2nd meeting after some discussion with the planning board and CRC. Shown in green is what's been added since the last public hearing with the planning board and the community resources committee. So I'll just walk through them, I guess, quickly. We changed the 250 occupant capacity to 200 patrons. That's interior and exterior, and that's whether they're seated or standing. And so it doesn't include staff. We think that the 200 patrons is easier to understand and control, manage. Staff can vary, from 3 or 4 to maybe 15 on a busy night. And so really it's the patrons that would be the threshold now. And so that's something we're asking for. We're proposing to ask for a layout plan with occupant capacity for indoor and outdoor dining. So every establishment would have to list what their patron capacity would be.
So Nate, that would be an additional posting beyond the assembly code occupancy?
No, so we're proposing to, I guess I should have stricken more, but it would have been just 200 patrons is the, the capacity is no more than 200 patrons. So it's not, the occupants, it's just the patrons. Is that,
Well, I don't have any problem with the text here. I guess the question of posting just is a different question,
in posting the legal ad, you mean, or?
No, I mean, every assembly space has to have a plaque
Oh.
on the wall that says, so many people can occupy this room.
Right, oh, right.
And are
right.
you saying there needs to be another plaque that says there's so many patrons?
No, so that's part of the permit, right? So that's not part of
Okay,
a building or fire code. So, those signs you see are for fire and safety, not necessarily for land use permitting.
right. Okay,
And we're also proposing in the BN, where, a bar, a nightclub, or a larger establishment. And, at one point previously, we had said by special permit, we're proposing to prohibit those and have them not be allowed at all in the BN, and only the proposed restaurant, cafe, or bar with food or similar establishment would be allowed through site plan review. And so there's some concern about having more impactful uses in the BN. In standards and conditions, number 5, we added some language about specific management strategies for alcohol service, such as hours of operation or hours of service and patrons leaving the establishment. Again, with the management plan, all these categories we see here, hours of operation, trash, refuse, storage, these are fields within the management plan the applicant has to complete, and then they become standards and conditions. So, we can add more. We do say any other requested information. So what we're really doing is building a number of criteria, review criteria that an applicant has to complete that then become conditions. So if they say they want to operate until midnight, that's it. If they want to go beyond that, that's a change. They'll have to provide their signs, their, how they're going to provide for queuing, lighting, delivery, noise containment. So all those things we expect that will be completed, and then they become standards and conditions. So we're adding some language about alcohol service specifically. And the other change is, in addition, is a new one, number 11, that there shall be no alcohol service after 1 a.m. And so that's something that's been common practice by the ZBA and the Board of Licensing Commissioners. So it's never been codified before, or it's not a town policy. It's been common practice, and so we're proposing that in the bylaw. And there wouldn't really be an exception to that. So there may be some existing establishments that have previous permits that allow a different end time for alcohol service. And as we said, an existing special permit doesn't just go away on a property, it remains. And so, typically in the last, 5 years, 10 years, 1 a.m. has been the ending time. And so, we're just saying that could be, put in the bylaw. So typically, if a alcohol service ends at 1, the permit would allow up to an hour afterward to clean up and close the establishment. So that's not necessarily a closing time, but it is end of service time.
Nate, I see Bruce's hand. Bruce,
Yes.
do you have a question on this page?
Yes, thanks. Nate, I noticed the change for 200 patrons, and that seemed to be, that is heading in the direction that I was advocating last time, of course. But I hadn't noticed the difference between occupancy and patrons before. So just because we were using Johnny's as a benchmark before, do you happen to know how many patrons, which is to say patrons and not cooks and cleaning staff and all those other folks that you mentioned contribute to the occupancy? Do you know how many patrons Johnny's holds?
I don't. I think it'd still be close to 170. And so, typically, they might have anywhere from 5 to say 15 staff on, maybe more on a really busy night if there's a function. But because they have a bar, they can have people standing, and so it's a fluctuating number. So right now they're whether the zoning bylaw and a permit said that they could have up to 200 patrons, their occupant capacity based on other codes may not allow that, right? So if their
Okay.
occupant capacity is 175, that's total, and then their patrons is, they may keep it at 150 just to be clear, depending on how many staff they have.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to check my reference. I obviously support the diminishment of number.
Thanks, Bruce. Janet?
I appreciate the clarity with adding the different application requirements and standards, and the clarity about, saying no alcohol served after 1 o'clock. But the more I look at this section, the more I'm just puzzled why it's in the use chart. Because, to me, the use chart is, what's your activity? What zoning district is it in? What kind of permit do you need to get, or are you allowed to do it? And so, I wondered if this should be pulled out into regulations, like the planning board and the ZBA could adopt regulations that say, when you're applying for a permit for a bar, restaurant, or a nightclub, you need, a management plan that, X, Y, and Z, to make sure clouds get, they don't queue up too much and whatever. So I just feel like this is just not in the right spot. And if it was a regulation of the planning board and the ZBA, we could sort of change it without having, going through town council. And so to me, like half of these things look like things that you want to see in the application and the management plan, and half of them are standards, like, use tableware that's reusable, and things like that. So I just think this is just makes the use table really complicated and really confusing. And so if I was an applicant, I would, go to my use table, all these conditions and management plan and application requirements are here, but then also I have a zoning bylaw that I have to look at. And then I also have a building code. And it just seems like, is there a way to simplify this process and the rules and the regs and, what we're going to expect for conditions for applicants, but not in this use chart?
All right, thanks, Janet. Nate, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the use chart has always had a place where the categories are, classifications are listed, and then there's standards and conditions here in this space. And so, for marijuana establishments, we have, we have like pages of standards and conditions. And so the benefit of having it in a zoning bylaw is the building commissioner, as the zoning enforcement officer, and, other boards and committees, regulatory boards and committees, can apply them. If they're in planning board rules and regulations, it may not be the case that the building commissioner could use these during administrative approval to have an applicant complete all these necessary steps. And so, the building commissioner in Massachusetts is the zoning enforcement officer, by it's a statutory requirement. So any building commissioner needs to enforce the zoning bylaw. And so that's why they're here, right? We find that they're upfront here. I mean, I don't find that it complicates the zoning bylaw any more than a zoning bylaw is already complicated. And so to have these upfront is, we find it to be a benefit to applicants and architects, that this is what they're required to do. And this is what will, generate conditions and enforcement actions by, regulatory boards and the building commissioner. So, I mean, sure, some of the reasons why these are somewhat generic and not so prescriptive is that to change them would require changing the zoning bylaw. So, in the management plan, we say, in any other requested information, it's not an exhaustive list. And really, these are things that we're expecting an applicant to provide. We're not saying exactly what their floor plan has to look like. We're just saying that they have to provide a floor plan, right? There's more information in the rules and regs in terms of if we want to say what exactly the scale needs to be or the size of the sheet. But we're saying they need to provide these things. And so in our, from staff's perspective, these are reasonable to have in the zoning bylaw. I mean, we've already had this in the BN district down here, which gets pretty detailed. So the rest of these are, we find that they're useful, especially because then they can be applied by the building commissioner.
All right, thanks, Nate. Andrew?
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Nate. My questions are pretty quick. On 5, I'm not sure what you mean by patrons leaving the establishment. It's just the way that's worded there. The strategy for patrons leaving the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, so like at closing time, if there's if there's a number of people, how would they close down? Sometimes you might have, staggered leaving times, or you might actually have someone
Patrons?
on the sidewalk, a staff person on the sidewalk managing the crowd as they leave the establishment. So, we found that it's really, how many, how many people are in the establishment, and then do they just usher them out in 2 minutes and 100 people have to leave, or do they have stagger times and slowly let people out single file with, a staff person there, or with, other things to direct traffic to a certain way.
And this,
Okay,
this was in response to some concerns, I think, in CRC from, that at closing time, the neighbors might be disturbed.
Right. And so, what's happened in some instances, we've asked that they, put more plantings in, or actually have a fence up, just so that during, when patrons leave at night, they can't go a certain way, or it helps to mitigate some noise. And so, we're not proposing specific, strategies there, or, means and methods. We're saying you have to tell us, applicant, what you're going to do that.
It makes sense. I think it just reads a little
Weird.
kludgy, sort of as is. So I don't know if maybe a way to tweak that. And then also I'm just wondering whether when we're using strategies, but are we really talking tactics? Like, we want to have more concrete how we're going to do this stuff, not just what, if that right.
Maybe
so like what are the tactics?
Management plans. I mean, it's already a management plan. So.
Yeah, well, I guess when you talk about specific management strategies for alcohol and strategies to screen filter, is it more we want to have explicit tactics? Like, that's what we're looking for? It's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think by having this in there, we get the same type of response, whether we call it strategies or tactics, or something else. These become fields in an application, in the management plan application, that need to be completed.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Nate, one thing I've been sort of wondering about was, it seems like when you talk about the different categories of restaurant, or particularly the bars with food or bars with no food, when we get to that kind of conversation, you say, well, it's not really about whether they give out peanuts, it's about whether the kitchen is operating, or whether they have a kitchen.
Right.
And that kind of makes me wonder whether it ought to just be bar with operating kitchen, or bar without operating kitchen. Is that really what you mean?
No. So, well, we have a definition for what a bar is in the bylaw. So it's a place where, the alcohol consumption and service is the primary function, and food may be incidental. So you can have there can be many restaurants that have a bar, but their primary purpose, say during most of their operating hours, is food service, right? They have people seated and they have the kitchen operating. And they could at some point transition to a bar with no food served, right? So they could be a bar, they could be a restaurant. And so it's not that the kitchen is or isn't operating, it's really what becomes their primary function. And right. So I think if we had the categories you had, Doug, I think almost every establishment might have to get 2 permits then to operate, because there would either be one or the other. And we're saying in the proposed first category, a restaurant, cafe, or a bar with food, that you could be both. If at some point you want to be a bar with no food, you then go to the second category, which requires a special permit. So
okay, all right. Janet.
So basically, I think that you could, just to make it easier, I think for everybody to have an application for a bar, restaurant, nightclub, restaurant that lists all the requirements, like we need a floor plan. And so I think it'd be easier if you had a specific application for this kind of thing. And so the applicant's like, oh, I have to fill out all these things. We have a very general application. And then I do think it'd be better if we had inside the bylaw the standards and requirements. So I think it'll be easier. But pushing that aside, I have one very quick comment is, can a bar with food just have like sandwiches and kind of cold food? Would that be a bar with food?
It depends. So is it, is it prepackaged or how is it prepared? So, it gets down to that kind of sometimes that level of detail in terms of food preparation. So if a bar has prepackaged food, that's just considered a bar with no food.
Okay, so so it could be like cold food, but it has to be chopped up. So the other issue that really just gets, I think, is super important, and I don't want to go through all my entire memo, is that I think that is last call. So I think a bar that serves food and a restaurant that serves alcohol, if they're staying open till like 1 or 2 in the morning, they're mostly probably serving just alcohol, right? And so last call is very impactful on neighborhoods. And so I am struggling why that somebody who wants to serve after 11:30 alcohol doesn't have to get a special permit. And I think that nighttime activity of leaving a place you've been drinking, especially in a college town, is much more impactful, I think, than just having a restaurant, bigger than Johnny's. And so I really do think that we need to continue special permit for last call. If we're extending the hours to last call, we need greater protections with the special permit. It's a little stricter in the beginning, gives you more, ways to say no or requirements, but also it has notice, a public hearing, notice to abutters, a chance for people to come in and talk to the ZBA and talk about their concerns. And so I think that we are losing that by allowing people to extend their hours past 11:30, people drinking and then leaving. And I think that behavior of people leaving bars or bar restaurants or restaurants that have alcohol is going to be particularly impactful in our many village centers that aren't used to this kind of activity.
All right, thanks, Janet. All right.
Yeah, well, just quickly, I think that a bar with no food is a special permit. So if there's a restaurant that at some point ceases its operation of food service, it becomes a bar with no food served, and that needs a special permit. And so that would require a public hearing. Additionally, any establishment that is serving alcohol has to go through the Board of Licensing Commissioners. And if they want to extend their hours to serve alcohol later, it's a required public hearing with notice to abutters, just like a site plan review or special permit. And so anytime there's a change to the alcohol service, the Amherst Board of License Commissioners will hold a public hearing with notice in the paper and abutters, and they can place conditions on an establishment in terms of things related to alcohol service. Also, the fire chief and police have to approve and sign off on an application for changes to alcohol service. So, when staff met with with Janet Keller and Pam Rooney today, and they had some similar concerns, but what we explained is that 11:30 is really an arbitrary number, and it's not as impactful as the operation and management of an establishment. So with the standards and conditions we're proposing 1 through 11, it gets at how we can manage people leaving or how noises are mitigated. It's not necessarily the hour of 11:30. It's really, it could be 10 o'clock and it could be poorly managed. It's really, how do we have conditions and safeguards that can be applied to an establishment. So it's really not the hours of operation. Also quickly, an administrative approval has taken 20 years of permit conditions and generated this list right here. So during the use of Article 14, almost 20 restaurants have been permitted through Article 14. And there's been some public hearings. There's been no complaints. There's been, typically when, like we said, when a restaurant comes in, they go into class 1 and then they shortly after go to class 2. And in the last so many years, Rob Moore said that not one resident has come to a public hearing when a restaurant goes from a class 1 to a class 2 to extend alcohol hours to 1 a.m. No one ever comes, even though the abutters have been noticed. And so with administrative approval, what Janet's saying is right, that if a restaurant is already established and there's no changes, it may be able to extend alcohol service or certain parts of the business with administrative approval. However, administrative approval still requires all these conditions to be met, and it's more flexible than a special permit because the building commissioner can open up their administrative approval and possibly revoke it if the conditions aren't being followed. Once a special permit is issued and conditions are laid out and the special permit is finalized, and say they're operating according to the special permit, but there's still a lot of complaints, it's almost impossible to go back and tell the owner they have to do something differently if they're meeting the conditions in the special permit. So, administrative approval with the building commissioner having a written decision that's at their will is actually more flexible and provides more opportunity for follow-up than a special permit. A special permit only has a 20-day appeal period. So, once a special permit or a site plan review is granted with conditions, if we don't have the right condition in terms of how to manage patrons leaving the establishment, it's hard to change that unless it's, there's something that they're doing different in terms of their permit. So, we actually think that administrative approval has worked really well in the last 2 years, and it hasn't, there hasn't been any issues.
All
I have a
right, thanks. Oh, Janet?
I have a quick question. So Nate, I'm not that familiar with the Board of Licensing because I think it was different under the olden days. So if I was going to open a bar restaurant and I was coming in, I want to be open till like 1 in the morning or 2. That would be site plan review, but would that still always that, I'm a new place, I want to stay open late, I'm on site plan review, would I still have to go in front of the Board of Licensing for that?
Yes, any time. So, and they have to go through the Board of Health, typically too, if they're a restaurant or serving food. So, any new construction or new, so if there's a new expansion or new construction, it will always trigger a hearing. As we mentioned, there's administrative approval if there aren't many changes to the exterior, right, in the section 11. But even if there's administrative approval, they still have to go through a public hearing with the Board of License Commissioners. So.
All right, thank you, Nate. All right, I don't see any more board hands at this point. Public attendees, does anyone in the public want to make any comments at this time? I see 4 attendees. I see Pam Rooney's hand. If we can bring her over. Pam, please give us your name and your address.
Hi, it's Pam Rooney, Cottage Street. I have a related question. It is not germane to specifically the changes that are being made. And that is in the Article 5, do the proposed changes actually allow us to handle pop-up events? I see, we talk about accessory uses of outdoor dining and or music, but is this going to help in the arena of pop-up events?
Nate?
Yeah, so it depends. If there's a one-time event, that's considered a temporary event typically, and that doesn't address that. An accessory use would be something that may happen periodically or with some frequency, whether that's, a number of events in a short time frame or, once a month, but every once a month, but continuously for, every month. And so that becomes an accessory use. So the changes we're proposing in Article 5, they don't address temporary uses. I will say that currently staff has a technical assistance grant with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and we've been investigating, other bylaws and coming up with a draft bylaw for temporary uses. It's not ready yet, but probably in the next few months, it'll be ready to be reviewed. And so, yeah, right now the bylaw doesn't have a mechanism for temporary events. And so when that moves forward, we may change accessory as well, because, some people may assume accessory means temporary, but we're going to have them be 2 different things, just to allow for different permitting.
All right, thanks, Nate. All right, so I guess at this point, seems like we've gone through everyone's comments. And Nate, are you looking for a recommendation from the board to these changes?
Right, and so, town council has referred this, and it's, the CRC has kept their hearing open. They're meeting tomorrow night. And so at this point, it would be, a recommendation on those changes. So, we have the revised use table, and then we have the changes to Article 5, 11, and 12. And so it'd be a recommendation on those, yes.
Okay, so would anybody like to make that motion? I see Bruce's hand first.
Yes, that's what my intent was. So I was going to try and frame the motion, but if I can say so moved, and Pam understands what that is, or she does, so moved.
All right,
And I should say, I really appreciate the effort that the staff, particularly you, Nate, put into this. And I've just watched you also on the CRC meeting, and I thought that was very helpful to my understanding, in addition to what we had last time. So I really applaud the diligence that you've applied to this exercise.
okay, thank you, Bruce. Janet, you got your hand up next.
Are we gonna, I think we should go article by article, not like the whole kahuna,
I guess,
whatever that means.
Nate, do you think we can do this as a single motion, or do we need to go through them individually?
I mean, it could be either one. I guess it depends on how board members feel, if they want to, have specific comments to some of the articles, or if it could be addressed as one vote.
Okay, and Bruce, do I understand your motion was for all the changes for all of the bylaws in one vote?
Yes, I think we can do it in one. I think we've reviewed it fairly thoroughly, and I'm comfortable with that. I understand everything that I need to understand from A to Z, and I'm happy to do it in one hit. But we'll see whether that works.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
I second that.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, board members, we've got a motion on the floor. We've had a fair amount of discussion. Do we want to have any more discussion before we go through a roll call vote? I do not see any hands. So Chris and Pam, are you clear that this is a motion to amend Article 3, Article 5, Article 11, and Article 12 as proposed?
As proposed. Mhm.
All right, Janet?
So I just need help. So I'm fine with Article 11. I'm fine with Article 12. I'm kind of rolling along with the use table. I'm not fine with Article 5. And so how do I vote? Do you know?
Well, you can oppose. Do you have questions for Nate about Article 5?
Well,
What is it you don't understand?
It's not that I just don't support the, half the changes in Article 5, I'm fine with, the other half I'm not. And so I don't want to vote against Article 12 and 11 and 3 when, do you know what I mean? And so it just puts me in an awkward spot. But,
Okay.
I mean, if you want to do it all up and down, I don't want to be seen opposing things I support, if that makes sense.
But it is an interrelated package, though. I mean, I would hate for us to approve the changes to 3 of them and not the 4th.
Doug, if I may.
Yes, Bruce.
Whenever I've been chair of things like this, I've always appreciated a unanimous vote when I can get it. It seems to me that if I were to amend the motion to exclude for the moment Article 5, but everything else, we might get a unanimous vote, and then we can have a second motion to approve Article 5, which I think.
Yeah, I guess at the moment, I need to ask Nate. Does it work if we break it apart and have separate votes?
Well, I guess the question would be, it would. I guess the question would be, as part of the discussion with the motion, what are the changes or the questions related to Article 5? So
yeah, why don't we just go through that? Janet, what is it? What are the objections you have?
So I still don't understand why in Article 5, we're adding every possible use in the use chart to seasonal outdoor dining and pre-recorded entertainment. And so I don't see, I think that, it makes sense that those things should be always related to food. And I think if you want to be able to do temporary uses for outdoor dining or a pop-up or trucks or, a music festival, I feel like we need to give the building commissioner the authority to do that. And I don't
Yeah.
think,
I'm sorry, but it seems like it's not that you don't understand, it's that you're not comfortable with this potentially happening for any use.
yeah, it's just this huge expansion that I just don't know. I just don't understand what circumstances it would come up that we'd have outdoor dining with a gas station, or like why, what are some examples where this has come to the building commissioner, the planning department, where somebody wants to do music with shoe shopping?
Okay, let's see. I mean, I know we talked about this in the last meeting. Nate, is there anything new you want to say?
No, I think that, right, so what we're proposing here is originally there's, these three, well, more than three, I list a number of things, it's more like, a dozen, where outdoor dining could be an accessory use. I think in the bylaw, we say that accessory has to be, related to the principal use. And this is only section 5.04 that's visible here. And it has to be common, within the region in Hampshire County. So, our thought is that we can't, there could be some business opportunities or things that we're not thinking of right now. And so why limit them? Because someone couldn't come in and just say, oh yeah, when my business is closed, I'm going to do outdoor dining. Really, the business has to be open and the outdoor dining has to be accessory to the use that, the principal business use, retail use. And so it can't be that they think that, like Xana couldn't say, oh yeah, in my parking lot after hours, I'm going to start doing outdoor dining. That's actually a second principal use, and that would have to go through permitting. It wouldn't be considered accessory. And so, without trying to be exhaustive in terms of a list like we have now, we're just saying any principal use. It may seem strange, but that also means they have to have a kitchen and have a Board of Health permit and review. So it's not taken lightly. It's not as if an establishment will just all of a sudden try to have outdoor dining and buy food, buy sandwiches at Stop and Shop and then sell them over their counter, right? It's going to take, licensing and permitting through the Board of Health and other boards and committees in town to make this happen. So we don't think that there's going to be some kind of, necessarily unintended consequence. It's still going to be reviewed thoroughly. So it still requires a special permit or a site plan review according to how the principal use is permitted. So if it's a special permit use, the accessory use, whether it's outdoor dining or music, has to be a special permit hearing to allow that accessory use to happen. So, it may seem strange, like, oh yeah, why are we saying to any principal use? But, it could be that, a gas station could serve food, right? Now gas stations have Starbucks in them, or, Cumberland Farms is an example now where it's a gas station and a store. And so we're not, we may not know how a retail store could combine, outdoor dining.
Okay, thank you, Nate. Tom, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that this is a recommendation to the CRC, right? This is not necessarily an approval by us.
No,
So
this is a
actually have-
recommendation to town council.
Yeah, okay.
Then they
thought-
would have, their, then they would take it up as, the CRC would have to also recommend it, but then it becomes, a zoning amendment that's being reviewed by town council.
Right, but we're in this group, we're not approving, we're recommending, just clarifying the language on that.
Yes,
Right.
Okay,
we're a
you.
recommendation. Janet, your hand is up again.
So Nate, I guess what I think you're saying is it has to be an accessory, a traditional accessory use to a principal use. And so that limits how expansive this is. When I think if you just wanted to limit it to food and drink establishments, you can get rid of all that list. If it's traditional to have outdoor dining, seasonal outdoor dining with food and drink establishments, why don't we just say that? Because I kind of think you can't argue that, oh, this is, outdoor dining is an accessory use to the principal use of a food and drink establishment. So don't worry, it's not going to expand. And then argue, oh, it's fine if it expands somewhere for some reason. And so I feel like there's just not a lot of vetting about what that could mean and implications. So that's.
All All right, well, it does sound like you are more concerned about it than staff as it being a problem. Chris?
I think that we discussed this internally and we also wanted to allow for uses like bakeries and delis and places like that, which are really retail stores, to be able to have outdoor dining if what they're selling could be eaten outdoors, at a table. And so, we didn't want to limit it from that point of view and just have it be available to food and drink establishments. Because I think it's clear that we can imagine other places that have kitchens that could do outdoor dining that wouldn't necessarily be restaurants.
All right, thank you. Okay, don't see any more hands. We have a motion on the floor. All right, are we ready to go through a roll call vote? Yes, Bruce?
Do we have a second?
Yes, we do. Tom Long.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then it's all the zoning amendments.
Yes,
the-
this is a vote on the entire package. So if you object to any part of it, you can vote against it. Okay, so we'll go through roll call vote. Starting with Bruce. A yes vote is to recommend to town council this package of changes to the bylaw, all related to food and drink establishments, as well as the other Articles 3, Article 5, Article 11, and Article 12.
I vote yes.
All right. Tom?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Janet?
Abstain.
Okay. Johanna?
Aye.
And do we have Karen? Karen is at her reading, so Karen is absent. And I'm an aye as well. The motion carries 5 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 absence. Janet?
So I know you're probably tired of hearing me on this, but on this matter, I would like, I feel in an awkward stance because I actually am fine with several of these articles, but I would like that when we do the planning board report, that the pros and cons and the issues that I've raised or others have raised be incorporated into that. So, hopefully that will come out like faster and not at the last minute, but I have written quite a bit on this, so you could just cut and paste. But I do think it'd be good to get a kind of what are possible negative consequences or different paths or problems that people see. So thank you.
All right. And Chris, is it right that that report is usually probably composed in parallel or borrows from the minutes? Yeah, I see her nodding
Yes,
her
that's
head.
right. It is true that it.
Yeah, so
includes-
I think
looks at the minutes, yeah.
if we may want to look at the minutes next meeting and see how you've recorded it.
Mhm.
And if some of Janet's concerns have been mentioned.
Mhm.
All right,
Okay.
thank you all. So the time now is 7:22, and we can go on to our next item on the agenda, item 4, which is a public hearing for a site plan review. Let's see. All right, so this public hearing is held in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A. Actually, I'll just say, did I say it was 7:22?
Yes.
Okay. This joint public hearing has been duly advertised and notice thereof has been posted and is being held for the purpose of providing the opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding SPR 2023-01 and SPP 2023-01 Archipelago Investments LLC, 47 Olympia Drive. This hearing is being continued from August 3rd, September 7th, September 21st, October 19th, and November 2nd. It's a joint public hearing to request site plan review approval under section 3.326 of the zoning bylaw to construct a private apartment style dormitory with 68 dwelling units and associated interior and exterior spaces and associated site improvements, including waiver of on-site parking requirements and a special permit to modify maximum building coverage and height requirements under section 6, table 3, footnote A of the zoning bylaw, map 8D, parcel 18 in the RF zoning district. All right, are there any board member disclosures? All right, I don't see any. Chris, do you want to start as the applicant tonight?
I just wanted to mention, I had sent an email to Doug earlier today, based on a conversation I had with Kyle, and also based on some information I got from Aaron Jacques, the wetlands administrator. And so this project for 47 Olympia Place is still being heard by the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission has a few items that they need to have resolved before they can close their public hearing and issue their order of conditions. And the next time that the Conservation Commission will be hearing this case is December 14th. So I'm going to recommend that the planning board hear from Kyle Wilson. He's the proponent, should say, and that you have a discussion, and then if you feel comfortable with this, go through the findings and conditions that we've sent you, and you know, kind of get as far as you can with this, and then continue your public hearing to your meeting on December 21st, which is after the Conservation Commission will have presumably closed its public hearing and made its decision. And that's our recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, Kyle Wilson.
Good evening.
Welcome back, I guess I'd say.
Thank
you. So would you like to make any sort of presentation this evening?
I'd just like to follow up with what Chris said, and we are before the Conservation Commission. All the substantial issues have been addressed relative to stormwater and infiltration and under retainage and so on. The two remaining items are a wetlands mitigation fee, or a buffer, in our case, a buffer mitigation fee. It's a new item in the bylaw that came in June that we're looking to resolve, and also something that we could discuss today, but they're looking for something that states that we have the right to tie into the existing storm sewer that exists on site. So other than that, all the items have been addressed with Concom, and we'll be back before them, as Chris said, on the 14th. What we wanted to, relative to the planning board, there were the bicycle storage was an item that we've worked on. We're looking at covering the bicycle storage on the north. That would not impact our Conservation Commission or our infiltration or stormwater coverage or anything of that sort. It's more of a design detail that we're working with the architects. It would also impact our exterior lighting plan for our photometric plan. So I think what we'd be submitting to you following this meeting in advance of the 21st would be some details on that fencing and covered bike storage that would include a updated photometric plan.
Kyle, would that also affect your lot coverage by additional coverage?
No, that's as it has been submitted and as has been presented and accepted by the Conservation Commission. None of that changes. It's just in that concrete pad, we would look to cover the bike storage.
Okay. All right, Chris.
That's an interesting question, and I think we could take advantage of. Is Rob Morris still here?
Yeah, I see his square.
Yes. I think we might want to clarify that with Rob Mora, that the coverage of bike storage would not be considered building coverage. And perhaps Rob could be asked to answer that question.
Rob?
Yeah, that's correct. It would not be considered building coverage because it's open. The sidewalls are open, so just the covering itself would add to lot coverage, not building coverage.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right, because we do have a special permit being requested for building
Right.
coverage. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess we're right at 45.35%.
We're a little bit over.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, your hand is down now. All right, so Kyle, there really isn't anything you want to update us on, and there's no materials you want to show us?
Nothing in addition to what we've already presented, but I could share, re-show anything that anybody wanted to see.
Okay, so you have it available if we want to look at it.
Sure.
Okay, board members, I guess now is the time to continue our conversation about this project. Are there any topics that people want to talk about? Bruce?
Finding my unmute button. Yes, I wanted to go over my concerns about the parking. Kyle, I asked you some questions about this last time, and as I recall, essentially you were saying that you wanted to trust in the UMass parking system to solve the parking problem. And I'm going to turn my light on because I've got some notes that I want to read or make sure I cover properly and succinctly. Doug, I sent this email to you, so you at least know what I'm thinking here. Excuse me a moment. Basically, Kyle, I'm not sure that I'm ready to trust that the UMass parking will satisfy the problem, because there's no guarantee that you say that the deed entitlements will be ratified. And we've just, again, in the last day or two, had another email from the university, which is confirming that they're, again, for a year, 2 years in a row, have been oversubscribed to the total number of parking lots. Is that not correct, Doug?
I don't believe so.
Chris, did I misunderstand the email?
I think the recent email from Nancy, I don't think it said they were oversubscribed.
So there was a late breaking bit of news, which is a second email from Nancy Buffone. The first email was one that was issued in August in response to a question I had asked. And she reported on past years of parking lots being full. And then I asked her again because I wanted to know, has anything changed? And she responded today saying this year there are available permits for lot 13. She can't say that those will be surplus every year, but they are surplus this year. Any UMass student can apply for a parking permit, etc. So you can read the email here. So this is the latest information from Nancy Buffone. I also sent you a plan that Kyle had submitted previously and you had received previously, showing where lot 13 is. So the lots up in this neck of the woods are lot 13 and lot 24. Lot 24 is kind of smaller and it's closer to the building that's being proposed. Lot 13 is more distant from the building, but it's very much larger. So I don't know if we want to show that plan, if Pam has access to that.
I think it's up there. I see it.
I do not see a plan. I see Nancy's email.
Email. All right, let's see, new share.
It was a separate document.
I guess I can also comment anecdotally. What I've heard at the university is that there's not a problem with parking this year, and that it was during the pandemic when people weren't sure how long they'd be allowed to be on campus, that there was a greater number of cars. Chris, your hand is still up. Did you want to say anything else?
No, this is just the
Okay.
plan that I wanted to let you see where lot 13 is.
Okay, great. All right,
Can
Bruce.
you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, there are two lot 13s and there are two lot 24s. And they're not connected, so I've been perpetually confused about that. But nonetheless, okay. So that email is an update on the email that I was working off, which was a day ago, which wasn't so optimistic. So maybe we can trust this, but I'm not sure. That email makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. But Kyle, I have two things to ask of you. The first is, I mean, we've got your previous project right next door, which I guess is an exactly similar project, adjacent, exact same locations and so forth. And we've got a number of years of data, let's say 5. I would feel comfortable if I knew what the parking demands of tenants in, is it Olympia Oaks?
Olympia Oaks is the sort of affordable housing.
Okay, so it's
development that's
57. Yeah, okay. So I would feel more comfortable if I could see the parking demands of residents over the past 5 years for 57, because it's so similar. I mean, why wouldn't I not want to see that if I was being asked to trust that this system, which if not maxed out, is close to it, and I don't know that we should be confident that we can, for the life of this building, expect that the parking, that leaving this to the discretion, to the essentially where we asked to trust that the residents of this building will prevail in a competition for parking permits. And that doesn't feel to me to be a very responsible position for us to okay. I would be more comfortable if I could see that the adjacent project has been, that has worked for 5 years. I also wanted to, and I'll ask this question now too, because in the event that getting data for 57 is either too difficult or it doesn't pan out or what have you. Is there not a way in which you could come to some arrangement with the university where you would offer to expand some of the parking? I don't know how fully developed that stuff is. It seems to be roughly paved or hardly even paved, and maybe it could be made bigger and more spaces could be created if it were laid out better. And if not, certainly this parking that's provided could be better provided by paving and doing some other upgrades, lining and so forth. And whether a reasonable accommodation with the university where you would commit to do some portion of parking enhancement over their area in exchange for them honoring the deeded entitlements. Would you be prepared to take that up with the university?
Mr. Wilson, any response?
We have, last we met, we discussed, we've tried to get a sense of the folks that have parking permits that live at 57 Olympia, and have discussed that that's somewhat difficult because if someone purchases a parking permit from UMass, they are not required to use their 57 Olympia address. It can be a home address. So that information has a lot of noise to it. We're seeking a parking waiver. We're seeking that waiver because we think that this site is best utilized for housing and for optimizing the housing and the value of the housing and the taxable value of the housing on this 1 acre site. The site next door was approved as the model for this very unique location in Amherst that we're looking to further develop. I think that we've discussed with UMass improving the spaces across from Mather Drive for the drop off and for visitors and for connecting to utilities. I think conversations beyond that are relative to the folks that have those deeded rights that exist for our 2 parcels and the other 10 parcels that are owned through the Commonwealth through various ways. So I think that what we're seeking is to continue what is obviously working next door, and that's why we're seeking the parking waiver.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Tom, you're next.
Could I follow up, and
Sure,
Doug?
Bruce.
Kyle, you said that we should continue what's obviously working next door. And when I ask you for evidence that it's obviously working, you say you can't produce it because for reasons given. I mean, it just doesn't seem responsible for us to grant this parking waiver without at least some effort to secure the deeded entitlements to parking that come with the site. I mean, surely you can understand that.
I don't think there's any disagreement as to whether or not we have deeded rights to, the parcels that we have identified for parking and recreation. I think the question is to whether or not those parking spaces are sufficient for this housing to be built. I think that if the housing next door had created a conflict relative to parking, we all would have heard about it. We all would have discussed it at length. It has not created a parking problem. It's doing quite well. It's paying a great deal of taxes. It's providing a lot of, very important housing. It is on a bus loop that's named after Olympia Drive that the majority of the residents use for their transportation. So I think it is clear that there is not a parking problem. I think that we're looking to, as I said, build another project that looks to be as successful as the project to the north.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Tom, you're next.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Kyle. I mean, I have 2 comments. One is from I think the perspective of a student and looking for housing. And if I have a car and I can't park it, or I'm having trouble getting a parking permit, I'm probably not going to rent that apartment. And I think the reality of the user situation is wherever I'm going, if I can't put my car there, I'm not going to go there. Or if I have a lot that's across campus and I have to park there, that's what you get. And we know people who work at UMass who have to park in a lot a mile from their office because that's the only lot that's available to them. And then they park there and they walk to theirs. That's what happens on the university. And I think that's something we want to accept, that people are going to either have a car or not have a car or make decisions about where they want to live, but they're on campus and there's buses and there's bikes and there's ways to get to the places they want to be through the systems that exist. And second is that we've been asking or hearing from people for weeks and weeks and months, like, can we not put dorms downtown? And here we have an opportunity to not put dorms downtown. And we're complaining about whether or not people can park there. Like, these are not downtown dorms. These are the place where we want students to live in a vicinity of the campus where they can walk or take a very convenient bus named after the loop itself. Why are we actually trying to put roadblocks to something that I think is actually fruitful for all of the considerations that we've been talking about for so long? I don't see it. I don't see a reason to try to put any roadblocks up for something that is going to be beneficial for UMass, beneficial for downtown, and beneficial for the students that make the right choice to live in a place that either has the parking they need or don't, but they'll find parking if they want it, if they have a car. Otherwise, they're going to move somewhere else, and that's their choice. So I just feel like this is a wonderful place to put housing, and we should try to limit the roadblocks that might get in the way of actually making this a reality.
Thank you, Tom. I guess I'll just interject. You've basically said the comments that I thought I might say. You also are the only thing I would add is there's already 13,000 students who move into a dorm without knowing whether they will get a parking permit. Because they're all, they're all just gonna be going down to parking and applying for a permit. And so this just adds 400 or whatever, 300 students to that pool that UMass has to either satisfy or not. And some of the, if they ever run out, some of the students are likely to be students that live here, and many of the students who don't get a parking permit are likely to live in UMass dorms because the UMass treats all the students who apply the same. So, I applaud. I think this is a perfect place to be building another, essentially a dorm. It's already zoned for dorms. And I agree with Tom. All right, Janet.
So I come at this from a different perspective. And one of the things is I think we all want this project to go, right? Nice building, nice amenities, taxes for the town, places for students to live. We have a very small vacancy rate. I don't think people have that many options to pick and choose, but obviously whoever can afford this, they have a place to live. So I think we're all trying to make it go. But I see my job and our job as enforcing the bylaw, and the bylaw has parking requirements. And it's not really up to me to decide, I don't know, I never understand this board. Like, in one place we're requiring 4 spaces because there's 4 undergraduate students. We have 3 boarders. We want 3 spots for them. Here we have a building full of students and we're like, they can find something. I just feel like we're not freestyling here. We have a bylaw to implement, and it requires either 2 parking spaces per unit, or if we're considered a dorm, 1 per bed. So that's what we're enforcing. But so I really do want this project to go. I just personally and logically do not understand somebody who says, I have deeded rights to parking at these lots all around here. Please give me a waiver. And so I just don't understand why the developer or whoever owns it, the only person who has literally the legal authority to assert this right is the person who owns the lot. And so I'm interested, Kyle, in your discussions with UMass, when you say I have deeded rights to parking in these lots, can I have 100 spaces or 50 spaces, or I want these spaces? And when people apply to you, let's agree, they get it, right? I mean, have you had those discussions and UMass says, no, you don't have the right? I mean, if you have a right to parking, it seems like a no-brainer. Just let's say it, we decided as a board, we look at our bylaw, we decide how many spaces are needed. You have deeded rights, you provide them to the tenants. So have you, I mean, I'm sorry to get a little hysterical here, but just like, have you talked to UMass and said, do you recognize my rights to this parking? We need X amount of spaces. I think, Bruce's idea about, putting some pavement down, some striping. I would love to see some electric car chargers. You could be a benefit both ways. I mean, have you talked to UMass and have they said no?
Mr. Wilson?
We have talked to UMass. They recognize our deeded rights per the deed for parking and recreation. We have not discussed with them an exact number of parking spaces that we would need for these buildings that would usurp any other folks who are looking to purchase permits for lot 13 or 24.
But we have empty spots. So can you have those discussions saying, here's what we think we need, let's cap it at this? Because that would be really helpful.
Our consideration of this has thought that it would very much complicate John King's efforts to effectively manage those lots as best he can with all the parking that they're trying to manage all over campus. And that would be a complication that wouldn't really benefit anyone involved.
Okay,
So it sounds like he could have come to UMass with that demand, I suppose.
I think as I've discussed on previous meetings, we've chosen to take a path that is currently working. This is a gray area that is not black and white. We don't look to impose our rights as as owners of 2 of the 12 parcels upon the other 10 parcels, which obviously have not been developed and are a future opportunity. We look to continue to work in a collaborative fashion with UMass. They're getting the permit fees. They're managing the parking. It seems to be working well next door. We'd like to continue that. I think the imposition of a number of parking spaces that would be best guess, especially before us right now for the future of this building, as I said, seems to significantly complicate a process that seems to be working just fine.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Johanna.
Thanks. I'm thinking about this in the context of the town's climate and clean energy goals. And thinking about it in that context drives me to agree with a lot of the things that Tom proposed. So we know that we need to reduce emissions. Having highly efficient buildings that produce energy on site and that are all electric are a step in the right direction in terms of the type of housing we need to build. This also has quite a bit of density of housing, which is consistent with our climate and clean energy goals. It will have sheltered bike parking, is on a bus loop, and for ambitious students, they can even walk to campus from the site because it's just not that far. I think this is the perfect site where we would not require parking minimums. And when I look at the climate and clean energy leadership cities all across America, some of them are doing away with parking minimums because they recognize that we need to move away from making car ownership a default. And yes, there are going to be electric vehicles, but in addition to transitioning to electric vehicles, we also need to create spaces for people to live where they drive less and can live more. And to me, this is a perfect opportunity to walk the walk on those principles in our town.
All right, thank you, Johanna. Bruce?
Well, I'm moved by what Tom said about if the renter can't get a permit, that may decide to live elsewhere. So that's a compelling argument. I'm respectful of Kyle's statements relating to his confidence, having discussed with the UMass parking director and trying not to make his life too complicated unnecessarily, and that and what you said, Kyle, about 57 working in a more global sense without having to produce data to demonstrate it piece by piece. And I'm interested in your answer to Janet's question about the deeded rights and to the extent that you pursued them. So I'm thinking that my situation, I might be more comfortable then if I were to say, yes, I agree with Tom, I agree with and support Kyle's optimism, Kyle's experience, some combination of the two. But I guess the deeded rights are not going to go away. So if there was a problem in the future, I'm wondering whether we could frame a condition that would be acceptable to all, that would say that if there is a problem, in other words, we can confidently kick the can down the road, perhaps knowing that if there was a problem, the condition that said that the owner would seek to exercise those deeded rights to gain preference for the some of those available spots. I'm not able to draft that condition in my head, but I am able to imagine the presence of a condition in our list of conditions that would speak to an action that would be pursued in the future if a problem arose with our having granted the parking waiver. I guess I could ask that as a question of Chris. Is she there? Yes. Christine, or does anyone imagine that such a condition could be reasonably constructed? And I guess I should ask Kyle whether well, he might not be the owner. It could could be a long way into the future. But I would feel comfortable if the record showed, without having to do a search and having the institutional memory be so alive and well, that it could do it without being triggered by a condition. A condition would trigger the knowledge that there is a deeded right that has, at the time of application, for good reason, not being pursued. But in the event of a problem related to students and so residents and parking, that the applicant be encouraged to pursue those deeded entitlements.
Bruce, I guess I'm curious how anyone other than the owner of the building would know if there was a problem.
Well,
and it seems like the owner of the building, if they perceived it was a problem, might go back to UMass and say, this has been working, but it doesn't seem to be working as well or at all lately. And I think it's time for us to sort of rethink how we're jointly exercising our rights to park on those parcels. And I can see all that happening without any condition needed from us.
Okay, yes, I can see that too. That's a good point. Because I was going to say, well, in an ordinary situation, the parking, the problem might be arised by an abutters complaining that people are parking on their lawn, for example. But I agree with Tom that this is not a place where these kind of problems are going to manifest. So I'm okay. That was helpful. Thank you all.
All right. Well, we'll continue the conversation. Janet.
I'm actually interested in Bruce's idea. So I think basically the way to set that up is to have whoever owns this building inform the tenants that they, have X amount of spots per apartment or whatever unit or bed or whatever we decide is what's needed or required. And then the way they secure that is to apply to UMass. And if the people can't get parking through UMass, they contact the building owner and let them kind of negotiate with John King and to say, well, you have empty spots. We have a right to deeded parking. This person didn't get it, arrange it. So I think the only person that can enforce these deeded rights are the owners of the building. And, I think they have to get more, we can refer to that as a parking management plan. And the parking management plan is, if everybody at, 4070 Olympia Place gets a space next year, we're all happy. In 3 years, that may not happen. UMass is growing. In 5 years, that may not happen. UMass might be growing, but maybe people are going to a car-free existence, or very wealthy people at this don't want to drive to Whole Foods or to Vermont or to visit their relatives, all those things that we do with our cars. Maybe people are using few cars. There's no evidence of that, but I just think we have to protect the interests of the tenants. They need parking. If they need parking, they should get it. We need to enforce the bylaw. And I think we could write a condition that basically puts the burden on the owner of the building to basically say, everybody has a right to parking or X amount of spaces. And if you have any problem with UMass, come to us and we'll work it out for you.
All right. Thank you, Janet. Chris, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there is a possible condition in the draft conditions to deal with this. And it was a condition that we put on the 57 Olympia Place. And so this condition says, it's number 4 in the list of draft conditions. Parking for tenants at 47 Olympia Drive shall be provided as set forth in the management plan for 47 Olympia Drive. If the availability of parking for tenants changes from what is set forth in the management plan, the owner shall submit a new parking proposal to the planning board for its review and approval. So something like that could be imposed in this case.
And the management plan that has been submitted, I presume, simply says that the tenants are not guaranteed parking through the owner. They are expected to apply and take their chances with UMass. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
So that's how it's been working. Andrew.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I feel like this. So I hadn't really processed that the condition you just mentioned, Chris, but I found myself originally agreeing with what Bruce was saying, and then as I thought about, Doug, your comments some more, I feel like this might be sort of self-corrective to a certain extent, in that, you know, if people are not comfortable in finding parking spaces, as Tom alluded to, they won't go there, right? Like Kyle will know there's a problem when he can't lease out his building,
Right.
or when people are coming to him and asking to break their lease. He'll know, and it's in his interests as a business owner to rectify that situation. So it does feel like it could be self-corrective. Janet, I thought your comment about us not freestyling is great. And I'm trying to be I'm trying to respect that. I think that as I consider the facts presented, as I consider things relative to the, you know, our stance on trying to improve the overall environmental conditions in the town, I'm quite comfortable with this. I think that, again, if there's an issue, Kyle will be the first one to know, and he is the one who is most. He will be the party that is kind of most interested in rectifying this for the long-term success of this business. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Next, Janet, do you have anything new to say?
Could we pull up the section 7.9 of our bylaw that talks about waivers? And if we're going to talk about waiving it, let's just make sure we're applying the right standards.
Well, I don't know that Pam has that available to show on the screen. I can certainly turn to it. Is that section a long section, or should I read it?
It's just, I wouldn't read it. I'd pull it up, or we should look at it before our next meeting, because if we're going to waive it, we need to waive it using the criteria. I understand and appreciate the environmental thing, but I just think that we need to apply our bylaw to the situation. And we live in a town with almost no vacancy, and
this building will help.
But we're requiring we require parking so inconsistently on this board. I can't figure out what our standard is. Less than one at one place, less than one per unit at Michi, one per bed up on College Avenue, one per bed at the boarding house. I forgot what we did on Main Street or what we did. So I just, I think, I don't know, I support Bruce's condition, putting the burden of parking on that. If we're going to waive it, we have to waive it under a legal standard that we are, as a board, upholding. We're enforcing the bylaw. I mean, so let's look at it, and we don't have to look at it now, but let's make sure the conditions are met. They talk about a management plan. They talk about peak uses. If we were applying our new requirements, we might require shadow parking. No, let us just enforce our bylaw.
Okay. I guess we can come back to whether we want to go through that bylaw this evening. Bruce?
I think I would like to just clarify one other thing related to the draft conditions. Chris raised condition number 4, but draft condition number 5 is actually, I think, more. If we were to approve it, it's 5B says information regarding parking, including a statement in the lease that students have responsibility for obtaining parking for their own vehicles, and a rider in the lease regarding parking which shall contain the make and model of vehicle, vehicle registration, information regarding the vehicle's owner's permit to park a vehicle. I guess I guess that's consistent with what we've been coming towards, which is really, I'm kind of down to where Andrew was saying. This is a self-correcting problem, because I've been persuaded, I think, although I spent a lot of time not being able to imagine how I could be persuaded, but I think Andrew and the rest of you finally got to me. And I just want to make sure that if we are going to have other conditions that have leases and so forth, that's consistent with essentially a parking waiver. And I guess we should also, this is a parking waiver of all the parking, because of course waivers can be waiving half or a third or 10% or whatever. So this is a complete waiver we're talking about, I guess, because the total parking is intended therefore to be provided by the surrounding UMass and the obligation of the students to get permits. But the lease is seems to somehow, I guess it's just asking that permits were recorded. What I want to clarify is whether the intent of that condition, Chris, was to obligate tenants to get parking permits if they have cars. Is that the intent of that 5B?
Chris?
I think that's the intent. This was a condition that was imposed on 57 Olympia Drive. And I'm not sure what the outcome was, because I don't remember having seen a lease and I don't remember having seen information about vehicles. So this is a condition that probably needs to be talked about with the building commissioner to determine whether it really is, whether it really makes sense. So, and I haven't.
Well, I wonder whether Kyle can tell us how that condition has been implemented in your leases. Do you have a writer to the lease that has the automobile information, or does the lease just say, you know, you have to go get a permit from UMass and you don't provide parking?
It's a good question. I don't know. We don't have the information on the people that have any parking permits through the university. So all that parking has gone through UMass parking.
Okay. All right. So Chris, assuming we are continuing this hearing, I guess I see Rob Morris still on the call. Were you saying you needed to check with Rob about, excuse me, about
I should check with Rob about the wording of this, because I don't think I've had a conversation with him about it. Rob, do you have a copy of the draft conditions?
Yes, I'm looking at it now. I guess, you know, that condition, the way it's worded, reads to me that, you know, Kyle may be collecting the vehicle information from the tenant, but not necessarily whether or not they have obtained a permit. I'm not sure if that does what the board wanted in the 57 application, but it doesn't seem to get to the point about whether the tenant actually has obtained a parking permit.
So that condition probably needs to be reworded, or.
Yeah, I think if I were writing it, I would just delete everything starting with and a writer, because that information doesn't seem to be collected or really relevant to Kyle.
Can we bring that condition up so that everybody can see it? Is that possible? It's in the draft possible conditions.
I think so, Chris.
Doug, I could read out what's in the lease and the management plan, if people wanted that information, because there's a circle being kind of drawn.
Well, I was hoping Pam could bring up the relevant.
I'm trying to figure out how to get to my, hold on. I don't have the zoning bylaw. I'm trying to get to the packet. So Nate.
Yeah, we
can
were
you
looking
get
for the
this-
draft conditions.
Yeah. Which I could get to earlier when I was practicing. That's
All
not
right,
it.
there's your, I guess that's, what is that, Facebook or something?
Eh, No, that's Teams. Facebook. Nate, can you get to the packet quick? I don't know why I'm struggling. Hmm. Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, here are the draft conditions. So we're looking at, 4 and 5. And, I will say that we have it has been a condition before that, and it says in the parking section of the zoning bylaw that lease restrictions on parking can be part of the parking management strategy. So, if this condition reads that it's really, that the lease will contain language that it's on the tenant to find permit parking through the university, then that could be some of the reasons why the planning board would grant a waiver, right? So if that's where we're going, right, is trying to craft this to read that way.
Yeah, I just wonder, I think on the second line of 5B, I
You
think
just-
I would just end the sentence at vehicles and
Right,
delete
all
the
this.
rest of it.
Yeah.
But that may just be me. I see 3 hands. Actually, Nate, one of them's yours. Maybe that you're all set.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay, Tom Long.
I'm gonna decline right now because I had a comment about something way earlier, so I'll come back to that.
Okay, Andrew.
Thanks again. So quick question, is what is the plan for handicapped residents?
Kyle.
Yeah, there was a exhibit that was submitted last meeting that shows additional spaces being added to the existing handicap spaces on the north side of Mather Drive. So just across from the entry to the building, we would add additional parking handicap spaces and short-term drop-off spaces.
And that's in the exhibit, the lot 13 and lot 24 in sort of
That's in the
or in the lot 24
1027
33 spaces.
that we made. It's an exhibit from SVE, parking and Mathers Drive adjustment exhibit.
Okay. And how does that, I guess, how does that relate to your deeded rights here in agreement with UMass? That it's just that's
It's,
sort of
we're doing that. That's one of the parcels that is included in the deeded rights for parking and recreation. So UMass was receptive to us improving that.
okay, improving and capturing spaces to meet that need.
Just kind of the existing spaces have been maintained closer to what used to be UMass admissions, and then they kind of fall off in this corner. So improving that and making those handicap spaces that connect across the street.
Okay. And how many spaces in total do you know offhand?
Well, we're not changing the number of spaces there. There are in the lot just north of that, there were approximately 30 spaces that were painted Chi Omega that had been used as Chi Omega informally for 50 years. And we'd remove those, and those would all go into either 13 or 24, whatever UMass saw appropriate. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, so sorry, I was just going through.
That's it.
Yeah, here's where here's where the proposed parking would be, including that Kyle was just mentioning.
2 spaces, is that just 2 spaces? I can't tell.
Yeah, it looks like 2.
And then there's an existing 2 on the left side of that same run.
Yeah, farther down at the other end of
So
that.
all of those spaces are either handicap or visitor short term
All of them,
on that run
But
facing
the 8 or 9
47
spots,
and, yeah,
but
and
4 dedicated handicapped. There's just 4 dedicated handicapped.
correct.
All right, I guess, how do you feel about that? Relative to the number of new residents, I don't want to vary or go from what I mentioned before, but this is something that I just would love to have a little bit more clarity on. Is UMass was comfortable with this agreement. Is 4 doesn't certainly seems like a pretty small number.
Kyle, would it, based on the way the tenor of your conversations with UMass, if you discovered you had 5 handicapped people in your building and you needed a couple more signed as handicapped, do you think that would be a difficult thing to work out with UMass?
I do not. No.
Should we just ask for more now then?
I think it's balancing the handicap spaces and the 15-minute or the quick drop off spaces, and we could absolutely discuss that balance.
Okay, I mean, I think that'd be great. Good. There are a lot of folks here, so thanks.
All right, Janet.
I was wondering if we could also have a requirement of adding some EV charging stations, but I also just that for consideration. Nate, I'm confused. So I just want to, in my lawyerly way, applying law to facts, are we waiving are you suggesting we should waive under the waiver section, or are we applying the alternative ratio, ensuring that adequate parking for the proposed use will be provided? Like that's 7.0. So I don't think we can do both. We have to do one or the other. So do you have a suggestion on which part of the bylaw we should apply to this situation? Because it lists a bunch of factors we should look at or could look at. Maybe we should defer this for later, but I don't think we may not have to waive the parking. We might go under 7.0000, or if we go under the parking waiver, then we need to follow those. Do you have a suggestion for that?
Well, I mean, I think some of the intent of the revisions to the parking section is that, 2 parking spaces may not be appropriate or relevant, right? And so then it's the applicant's, it's on the applicant to provide what is the appropriate number, and the board can ask for information. And so if, the way this project is being permitted is it's for matriculated students. And so if there is a lease condition that the tenant is responsible for finding parking through their institution of higher education, then that could satisfy the parking requirement, because they're going to go through the university or through Amherst College or whatever institution they're enrolled in to find parking. And so if the board needs more information in terms of how many would that be or how many parking spaces can it accommodate, what we've heard is that UMass has enough spaces to accommodate the parking demand that's being asked. So I don't, it's really, I guess, a matter of how comfortable is the board with the that in the bylaw. So it's also bedroom count, traffic impact, parking utilization, peak demand, proximity to downtown, proximity to public transit, availability of alternative modes of transportation, tenant lease restrictions, shared or leased parking. So those are just a list of some criteria, and there could be more. So if the board thinks there needs to be more information, then there could be. I mean, I think some of it is with the traffic impact. I mean, we've heard the planning boards or the staff has heard from some members saying they're worried about traffic spillover. And so, one question would be, is a tenant who lives here really going to park, 2 miles away on Lincoln Ave every day, but live up on Olympia Drive? Is there really going to be an impact to downtown residential neighborhoods because of this development? And my thought is, I'm not sure someone would park that far away, given where their residence is.
Also,
So, but you know, that's something I think the board should discuss. Is there concern about some traffic with this, you know, or parking with this, off-site parking?
or a parking study with use within 800 feet. I mean, I
Right.
hope this section doesn't eat the whole section.
I mean, you know, given the parking plan that was presented, there's hundreds of parking spaces within 800 feet. I mean, so you know, I don't have the right answer, but you know, if we haven't, I mean, as far as I understand, the town hasn't heard complaints about Olympia Place, and so I'm not sure. You know, we could investigate further, but we haven't heard anything that there's a parking problem with that development.
Well, you know, it looks to me, you know, based on the way 7.0000 reads, or 70000, you know, that bulleted list, we have a number of conditions in that list that are applicable to this property. So, you know, I think it would be pretty straightforward to say that the adequate number of off-street parking spaces is 0 because of, you know, this property and this project have the characteristics that are in that list. You know, proximity to public transit, tenant lease restrictions relative to parking, shared or leased parking elsewhere. So, you know, Janet, I don't think we need to go to the waiver section. We could do it right here. All right, are there any other comments from folks?
Das Meeting?
No.
Geht noch weiter.
Yeah.
Du bist weiterhin.
Karen, it sounds like you are back. You're muted. So just for reference, the time is 8:20, and I think Karen Winter just returned to the meeting. Welcome back, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, so board members, we've gone through a lot of comment here this evening. And I think we are going to need to decide whether we're comfortable enough with this project to spend the time to go through the draft findings and conditions that Chris has prepared. So I wondered if we could get a kind of a straw poll as to whether people are comfortable enough to go through that or not. Janet, I see your hand.
I have a quick question. Is there a lighting plan? I have like so many pieces of paper. Is there a lighting plan?
I don't remember.
We have
Kyle?
not submitted the photometric plan beyond the bollards and the lighting that's shown on the landscape plan.
And all the bollards and lighting are dark sky compliant?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I'd like to just get a straw poll here. So I'd like to go around the board and just ask, are you comfortable moving on to the findings and conditions? So let's, I'll just start with you, Bruce.
Yes, I'm comfortable doing that.
All right, Tom?
Yeah, I'm fine. We're still waiting on information though, correct? From the wetlands or?
Yeah, we haven't got the final decisions and conditions from the Conservation Commission.
Okay. So
But
we won't be approving tonight, but
we
we'll
won't,
move
we
forward.
doubt, we don't intend to approve. We'll be continuing to December, is it the 21st? 21st, yeah.
Great. That's fine. Okay, I agree. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew,
Agree. Let's go.
okay. Janet,
That's fine.
okay. Johanna,
Onwards.
all right. And Karen,
Yes, I also approve. And I've been here for a while. Sorry.
okay, great. Yeah. In case you missed it, what we're going to go ahead and go through the findings and conditions. We've had a long conversation about parking and whether we need to impose conditions that are sort of protective of the tenants. But so far, we haven't really got a consensus about that. Chris?
I just wanted to note that Karen will be able to watch the video of this proceeding, and it would be necessary for her to do that in order for her to vote on December 21st. So we
And
can
will
send
you
her-
need an email or a letter from her saying she has watched the proceedings and therefore she understands she is eligible to vote?
Yes, I will need that.
So
Yep.
you'll need documentation.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so actually the time now is 8:23 and we usually take a break around 8. So I'm thinking, why don't we take a 5-minute break now and then we can come back and go through findings and conditions and the rest of our agenda. So please come back at 8:28. And in the meantime, mute yourself and turn off your video. Thank you.
Es geht noch viel weiter.
Ich habe denen Bescheid gesagt, dass du gebraucht hast in den
Mhm.
mir gesagt. Oh.
Die haben es unheimlich nett gemacht, die beiden.
Ja, du warst zum Teil auch da.
Ja,
Hast du
ja.
gesagt,
Ja.
Die ist so spritzig.
Ja.
Karen, I'd like you to know that you are not muted.
Oh, sorry.
All right, the time is 8:29, and if you are hiding behind your video that's off, please turn it back on. And Pam, I hope you'll be ready to bring up the draft findings and conditions again. Chris, I see your hand. Are you going to want to say something at the beginning when we've got everybody back?
Yeah, I just wondered if we wanted to start off with the findings. And what I would suggest is that, we'll make edits to these findings tonight, and then I can bring them back on the 21st of December for a final vote.
Okay.
So we probably won't have the final findings tonight, but you'll have the conversation about them.
Right.
Doug, I'm here, but I'm off camera.
Okay, thank you, Janet. So we've got everybody from the board back. Kyle, are you around? You are, okay. And I can dimly see Karen. So I know she's there. All right, so that's fine. Hello. All right, so Pam,
Yes,
if you could bring up the findings.
I'm not sure I can. Where is Mr. Malloy?
Ah, okay.
I practiced it. I just sent him a text saying I'm failing at the sharing.
Nate, are you there? All right, Pam, we can see your screen.
Yeah. Can't see the right screen. Let me see if I do it this way. Zoom document center.
Yeah, there
But-
they are. Great.
Can you see it? Yay,
Yes.
hooray.
Now, if you can enlarge it a little bit, zoom in a couple of times. There we
How's
go.
that?
Good, good, good.
Okay.
All right. So Chris,
Oops.
I know we often read these aloud.
So these are the findings having to do with the special permit. And the special permit is for maximum height and building coverage. So I will start to read these. There was a request for a special permit to modify dimensional requirements for maximum building coverage and height requirements under Article 6, Table 3, footnote A of the zoning bylaw. And here are the draft findings. The board found under Article 6, Table 3, footnote A as follows. Height, that the new building is proposed to be 56 feet, 8 inches in height. That Article 6, Table 3 dimensional regulations limits the height of buildings in the fraternity residence RF district to 55 feet. Number 3, that footnote A authorizes the special permit granting authority to grant a special permit to modify the height requirement if it applies the criteria established in section 10.395 of the zoning bylaw and considers the proposed modified dimensional requirement in the context of the patterns of the same dimensions established by existing buildings and landscape features in the surrounding neighborhood which have a functional or visual relationship to the proposed building. Number 4, that the nearby building at 57 Olympia Drive is 67 feet in height, in excess of the height limitations. That the nearby building at 57 Olympia Drive received a special permit in 2013, which was special permit number 2014-2, to modify the height limitation, and that decision for 57 Olympia Drive referred to tall buildings on the UMass campus in support of the requested height modification. Number 6, that in accordance with section 10.395 of the zoning bylaw, the proposed height of 56 feet 8 inches does not create disharmony with respect to the terrain and to the use, scale, and architecture of existing buildings in the vicinity, which have a functional or visual relationship thereto.
Pam, can you scroll up?
Does anyone object to any of those findings? The ones that we just read?
I do not see any hands.
Okay, then I will proceed. Building coverage. Number 1, that the new building is proposed to cover 45.35% of the property. Number 2, that Article 6, Table 3, dimensional regulations, limits the maximum building coverage in the fraternity residence RF district to 45%. Number 3, that footnote A authorizes the special permit granting authority to grant a special permit to modify the building coverage requirement if it applies the criteria established in section 10.395 of the zoning bylaw and considers the proposed modified dimensional requirement in the context of the patterns of the same dimensions established by existing buildings and landscape features in the surrounding neighborhood, which have a functional or visual relationship to the proposed building. That the nearby building at 57 Olympia Drive has a building coverage of 45%. That in accordance with section 10.395 of the zoning bylaw, the proposed building coverage of 45.35% does not create disharmony with respect to the terrain and to the use, scale, and architecture of existing buildings in the vicinity, which have functional or visual relationship thereto.
All right, so those are the findings for the special permit. Anybody have any comments or objections on those?
Okay.
Okay, so I don't see any objections. Why don't we go to the findings for the site plan review?
Well, oh no, what have I done?
I'm sure you can do it, Pam.
I don't know. It's so nerve-wracking. I'm going in here. All right, draft possible findings.
There it
Okay.
is.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did it.
Okay.
Okay, this is a long one. And these
You
are,
you want some help?
why don't we see if I can, how long I can last, and then someone can step in and help me if I'm faltering.
Okay.
So the board found under section 11.24 of the zoning bylaw site plan review as follows. 11.2400. The project is in conformance with all appropriate provisions of the zoning bylaw, with the exception of the provisions requiring waiver of on-site parking requirements and the special permit for modification of building coverage and height. The special permit has been applied for concurrently with the site plan review. A sign plan will be required as a condition of the site plan review, and the applicant has provided a plan to show the location of handicap parking in front of the building along Mather Drive. I think we should also make a note that the applicant has requested a waiver of on-site parking. I don't think that's explicit in this finding the way I wrote it. Okay. The second one, 11.2401. Town amenities and abutting properties will be protected because detrimental or offensive actions are not planned for this site. The site appears to minimize the possibility of detrimental or offensive actions. 11.2402. Abutting properties will be protected from detrimental site characteristics resulting from the proposed use. Lighting will be downcast and will not shine onto adjacent properties. 11.2403. Adequate recreational facilities, open space, and amenities will be provided because the property is close to UMass. Tenants will be able to use UMass recreational facilities since most tenants will be associated with the university. The property is located near a town-owned property with access to a trail that connects through Olympia Oaks to a town-owned trail system, providing additional recreational opportunities. And the building proposed for the site is large and takes up much of the property, but there is a courtyard proposed near the entry, which is available for use by the tenants. Are you noting if anybody has come?
Yeah, Chris,
concerns?
Janet just raised her hand.
So I don't think the bylaw lets you count sort of fields in, the UMass fields, but I know that the building itself has a lot of workout space and, group space. And there's a courtyard, and then there would be some access to local trails. So I don't think we have to count the UMass stuff in. I don't think that's what the bylaw is requiring. It's like the applicant has to provide the recreation, not UMass. So I don't.
So you would remove the first
Yeah, because
portion of that paragraph.
yeah.
Okay. Because tenants will be able to use UMass facilities. We'll strike that, and we'll strike because the property is close to UMass.
Yeah, there's plenty of good stuff in the building.
And we'll list the recreational space in the building
And keep the courtyard reference.
and keep the courtyard reference.
And the connection, can we, Janet, any objection to mentioning the town-owned land adjacent and the trail system?
Yeah, I think they, people can get access to it through the yard. That sounds fine. So.
Okay. 11.2410 is not applicable because there are no unique or important natural, historic, or scenic features on the site. 11.2411, proposed methods of refuse disposal are described in the management plan. They are considered to be adequate. Trash will be stored inside the building in a refrigerated storage area. 11.2412, the ability of the proposed sewage disposal and water supply systems to serve the proposed use is considered to be adequate. The property is connected to the town sewer and water systems, and the town engineer has reviewed the project and has not expressed concern with the proposal regarding these issues. So the property is actually connected to the town, will be connected to the town sewer and water systems through the connection that is in Mather Drive. So maybe we should note that. And Mather Drive is owned by UMass. Okay. 11.2413, the ability of the proposed drainage system within and adjacent to the site to handle any increased runoff resulting from the development is considered to be adequate. The town engineer has reviewed the project and has not expressed concerns with the proposed system. The project has also been reviewed by the Wetlands Administrator and Conservation Commission. So they're in the process of being reviewed by the Conservation Commission. So that statement will only be completed after we hear from the Conservation Commission. Anybody have a problem with that?
I don't see any hands.
Okay.
I just put mine up.
Hi, Bruce.
I don't have a problem. I just, question is, where it says has been reviewed by the Wetlands Administrator and Conservation Commission, shouldn't there be some favorable finding associated with that? I mean, just say, and
mean,
who found favor with the project or something like that.
Accepted or reviewed
Yes,
positively or
exactly.
approved or,
So that will have to be filled in after the Conservation Commission makes its determination.
Yeah.
Okay. 11.2414, provision of adequate landscaping will be satisfactory because a landscape plan has been submitted. The landscape plan has been prepared in accordance with the Amherst landscaping guidelines. And you all have received a copy of that, of the plan. 11.2415, the erosion control plan has been submitted. It has been reviewed by the town engineer and the Conservation Commission. In this case, I did make a statement and has been found to be satisfactory, but that has not yet come to pass.
right?
The town engineer finds it satisfactory, but we need to make sure that the Concom finds it satisfactory. And so far, we
Yes.
haven't heard anything negative about their erosion control plan from the Conservation Commission.
Chris, hold on a second. Bruce has got his hand up again.
Just in relation to the landscape plan, I believe the development report noted that the landscape plan, whereas, and I've seen it, we've all seen it, it's got it's very detailed and so forth, but the column that gives the numbers of the specific plants has not been completed. They're all just zeros or dashes, and the development plan notes that the quantities of the various plants should be well, I guess this is correct, isn't it? Because we're finding that it's been prepared in accordance. But well, is accordance does that require the statement, the numeric statement of the numbers of the various pieces, or are we going to are we not do we not need that piece of information?
So you're saying that the drawings really aren't final because they haven't included that the quantities of species?
I guess it's a question. First of all, does that indicate that they're not yet final? And B, is my information up to date, or have I just not seen the most recent version of the landscape plan?
Okay, Chris, you have your hand?
Yes, the landscape plan is the most recent one that you have, and it does not include the quantities. So we can ask that Kyle provide that information before the next meeting.
Kyle, do you see that being a problem?
I don't. I think the quantities are just represented graphically rather than numerically in the chart. We could look to do that.
Okay, great. Bruce, you're all set? All right, then I'll drop your hand.
Okay. Oh, and I drop my hand too.
All right,
Okay, 11.2416, adjacent properties will be protected from the intrusion of various nuisances, including pollution, light, and noise.
Yeah.
11 point, any problem with that?
well,
one?
I guess, Chris, what do you really mean by that? And you
Should-
know, how are you, I mean, do we need to have that statement? Because it seems pretty ambiguous how it's protected.
What does the original state? 1.2416. Okay, here's the original. Protection of adjacent properties by minimizing the intrusion of air and water pollution, flood, noise, odor, dust, and vibration through appropriate site and structure design and the use of appropriate design and materials for containment, ventilation, filtering, screening, soundproofing, sound dampening, and other similar solutions. I could
I
make
think
this
we need,
more-
yeah, we need to list some of those nuisances, you know, or the intrusion of all those things is minimized.
So would you like me to be more detailed about how the intrusion of these things is minimized?
I think we do need to, just because it's kind of ambiguous.
Okay, so I'll do that for next time. Okay. 11.2417, protection of adjacent properties by minimizing the intrusion of lighting has been discussed. We haven't really discussed that because we haven't seen a lighting plan yet.
Kyle, are we likely to have the lighting plan?
Yes, and the bollards, I don't have a photometric plan that I've shown. The lighting and the bollards are shown on the landscape plan and the civil and architectural, but we will be forwarding a photometric plan.
Okay,
So we'll wait until we see the photometric plan to finish this finding. Is that correct? But we do know that exterior lighting will be required to be downcast and dark sky compliant. And the applicant,
I mean, Kyle, will you be including the catalog cuts in that package?
Yes.
So Chris, you go back to the has submitted.
has submitted, okay. As of the time when you will.
Yeah, as of
findings.
how
Yeah,
we expect it to be next meeting.
Yep.
Or on the 21st.
okay. 11.2418 is not applicable because the property is not located in a flood zone conservancy district. 11.2419 wetlands will be protected by building in accordance with the provisions of the Wetlands Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Amherst Wetlands Bylaw. The project has been reviewed by the Conservation Commission. And I'm hoping that next time we meet, I can say that the Conservation Commission has issued an order of conditions or has closed its public hearing or something to that effect. Okay, 11.2420 is not applicable, and that is having to do with things that are in certain districts that are not RF. So if you're in the BL, BBC, BN, COM, OP, LI, or PRP district, these things apply, but we're not in any of those districts, so we're not applicable.
Chris, Bruce has his hand up.
I can't see. It seems like it needs to be scrolled.
Oh, sorry.
Good, thank
My
you.
apologies.
Okay, 11.2420 is not applicable. 11.2421, the development is reasonably consistent with respect to setbacks, landscaping, entrances, and exits with surrounding buildings and development. There will be no on-site parking. Tenants who own cars may purchase parking permits from UMass and use the adjacent UMass parking lots. Although there is no on-site parking, there will be a significant number of bike racks on the site located along the northern property line. 2 handicap parking spaces will be provided in the parking lot along Mather Drive with a crosswalk leading to the new building entry court. Is there anything else we want to say about that?
Andrew has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know I'd asked Kyle if we might be able to up the number of handicap spots. I think he said he could look into that. So just see where we land in later December.
Bruce.
I was going to ask a question, but it was a small one related to bike. I don't think the development report notes that there's no bike storage, interior bike storage. I mean, I know that Carl's mentioned that people routinely take their bicycles, particularly the ones they can carry upstairs and so forth. But I'm wondering, I was going to ask Carl whether any thought had been given to carving out some space for, I don't know, a small number of electric bicycles, which I don't think would be, people would trust the outdoor spaces for them, and they would need to be able to be plugged in somewhere. And I'm wondering whether as time goes by, this kind of requirement might grow, and whether we wouldn't ask, whether you wouldn't, Kyle, give some thought to whether that likely evolution of need would be catered for or could be catered for in some way within the building. And if that were the case, then that would also be a finding.
Kyle, any thoughts about interior storage?
Yeah, I think The interior storage is in the unit. I think that's what we found, folks who are looking to bring their bike in. We've got other interior storage, bike storage at other buildings, not highly used. So I think we've tried to strike a balance between exterior and covering it and interior in the unit.
I was thinking of the heavier electric bikes, Kyle, which may become a feature of the future. But I dare say when that arises, you could decide to deal with it. I can see a number of ways. So I'll just take that as a not yet answer.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Chris, you may
Okay,
resume.
11.2422, the building site avoids to the extent feasible impact on steep slopes, floodplains, scenic views, grade changes, and wetlands. 11.2423, not applicable. There will be only one building on the site. 11.2424, screening has been proposed for the mechanical systems on the roof. They will be located on the roof and surrounded by a parapet wall. Trash will be stored in the building, so there will be no dumpster on site. 11.2430, the site has been designed to provide for the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement, both within the site and in relation to adjoining ways and properties. There will be pedestrian access at 3 points into the building from the courtyard area.
Do you really need to say anything about vehicular? Because
No.
there's really no vehicular movement on the site.
Nope. Okay. Okay, 11.2431, the location and number of curb cuts is designed to minimize turning movements and hazardous exits and entrances. There will be only one curb cut for the service area at the side of the building, and there is an existing curb cut in the vicinity of this location. There will also be provision in the parking area along Mather Drive for 2 handicap parking spaces and a crosswalk to the new building. 11.2432, the location and design of parking spaces, bicycle racks, and drive aisles will be provided in a safe manner. So that really, I should take parking spaces out of there. Well, parking spaces are provided along Mather Drive, so there are handicap parking spaces along Mather Drive, and they're not on the site, but they are adjacent. So can I leave the parking spaces in there?
Yeah, I guess I wonder whether we need drive aisles. Is
So
that a term that you use in a parking lot?
Yes. So
Well, I mean, I mean,
there is a drive aisle on the Mather Drive.
on Mather, okay.
So anyway, the location and design of parking spaces, bicycle racks, and drive aisles will be provided in a safe manner. Bike racks will be provided on the north side of the building along the northern property line. A waiver has been requested from on-site parking requirements. Number 10.2433 is.
It's 11.
11.2433 is provision for access to adjoining properties. So that's not applicable. 11.2434, where possible driveways located in the commercial and industrial and business district shall be located opposite each other. That's not applicable. 11.2435, joint access driveways between adjoining properties, and that's not applicable. And then 11.2436, a traffic impact and access study prepared by Venice Hangen was submitted with the site plan review application for the previous project at 57 Olympia Drive. A new traffic impact and access study has been submitted now. I wrote this back in, I don't know, a month ago. Has been submitted for the new building to be known as 47 Mather Drive in the future. The new proposed project is not expected to result in notable impacts to area traffic operations. And 11.2437, a traffic impact report has been submitted. Has been submitted by the applicant. Yeah, so we don't need that second part, that it's expected to be submitted. Okay, so that's it for the findings for the site plan review.
All right, I don't see any hands.
And I'll make those changes that we talked about. And now do we want to go to talk about conditions?
Sure.
Hey, bear with me.
It's only 9 o'clock. We can keep going.
Ordinarily, we still have one more person to talk to, Mr. Gerfine, so
Yeah,
can't forget about him.
yeah.
So the conditions are related to the site plan review. I haven't drafted any conditions related to the special permit for the dimensional requirements, and I don't think those are needed, but you can let me know if you think they are needed. So the waivers that have been requested are the waiver for a sign plan, a traffic impact report, and on-site parking. So we no longer need the waiver for the traffic impact report because one has been submitted. So I'll start reading the conditions and see where we go. Condition number 1 in the general category. The development shall be built substantially in accordance with plans submitted to the planning board and approved on, hopefully it'll be December 21st, and we'll fill that in. Number 2, the development shall be managed substantially in accordance with the management plan submitted to the planning board and approved on X date. Number 3, occupancy of dwelling units at 47 Olympia Drive shall be limited to matriculated students enrolled at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Amherst College or Hampshire College, and their family members, and the resident manager and his or her family members to the extent allowed by law. Number 4.
Chris?
Yep.
And maybe this is a question for Kyle. If I were a student at Greenfield Community College, would I be able to be in your project?
It's a good question. I mean, we've currently got this provision at 57. Obviously, the majority of folks are from the university.
Yeah. Well, I guess I wondered
I'd
whether
like to accommodate, but
whether it should just say matriculated at an institution of higher education or something like that, and just because that's what the zoning limits it to.
Yep.
And not name the institutions.
Okay. So we will take care of that. Number 4, parking for tenants at 47 Olympia Drive shall be provided as set forth in the management plan for 47 Olympia Drive. If the availability of parking for tenants changes from what is set forth in the management plan, the owner shall submit a new parking proposal to the planning board for its review and approval. What do you think about that one? Is that okay?
Yeah.
And number 5, a lease shall be submitted to the planning board for review and approval. I think we did get the lease already. The lease shall include the following: A, limitation on who may occupy the dwelling units at 47 Olympia Drive as described in condition 3 above. B, information regarding parking, including a statement in the lease that students have responsibility for obtaining parking permits for their own vehicles. And we've decided to eliminate everything after that in B, which I have crossed out on my copy here.
I think that's correct. Nate's raised his hand.
Oh, yeah, sorry, just going back to number 3, the bylaw and the use chart does say, a fraternity or sorority building or social dormitory or similar use related to Amherst College, Hampshire College, or the University of Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it says related to, but I don't know if we can.
Okay, so those can stay then.
Yeah.
I guess if it's that specific.
It is, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nate.
Yeah.
Number 6, upon change of ownership or if the property is no longer managed by Archipelago Investments LLC or its affiliate Amherst Innovative Living LLC, The new owner and or manager shall submit a new management plan to the planning board at a public meeting for its review and approval. The purpose of the meeting shall be for the board to determine whether conditions of the permit are being complied with and whether any modification to the site plan review approval or management plan is required.
Okay,
Number 7, substantial changes to the project and or substantial changes to any approved site plans or to the exterior of the building shall be submitted to the planning board for its review and approval prior to the work taking place. The purpose of the submittal shall be for the planning board to approve the change and or to determine whether the changes are de minimis or significant enough to require modification of the special permit or site plan approval. Number 8, landscaping shall be installed in accordance with the landscape plan prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, and once installed shall be continually maintained as needed. All disturbed areas shall be loamed and seeded unless otherwise specified. Number 9, the building shall meet all required energy efficiency codes and regulations of the Stretch Energy Code. In addition, low-flow plumbing fixtures shall be installed throughout the project.
Bruce has his hand up.
Just gives me the opportunity to ask another small question that I had related to the development report, which I think says that the hot water is by gas, and it goes on to talk about gas connections and so forth. But Chris, I think maybe that is an anachronistic comment, or Kyle, is there indeed gas energy providing the water heating?
The intent is that a all electric hot water, the same system that we're using at 11 EP downtown. We are going to need some fossil fuel for the generator, but the hope is that that's the only fossil fuel that we use.
So that would be what would drive a propane tank, which we may get to at some point.
Just for the generator.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Chris, I think we were up to number 10.
And this site plan review approval shall expire within 2 years of the date that it is filed with the town clerk, unless it has been both recorded at the registry of deeds and substantial construction or use has commenced within the 2-year time period. Number 11, construction shall be completed within, and I wrote 30 months here. I think that was what we said for 11 East Pleasant Street. And I don't know, that's something that you could discuss with the applicant. Anyway, 30 months from the date of issuance of the building permit. If more time is needed, the applicant shall come to the planning board at a public meeting for review and approval of an extension of time. So is 30 months?
30 months is fine.
Kyle is indicating that's fine.
Okay. Okay, I crossed out the next things because they've been submitted. Number 14, a sign plan shall be submitted to the planning board for its review and approval prior to the installation of signs. Now, the applicant has asked for a waiver of the sign plan, but usually we put something in about signs in the conditions. So I think he doesn't actually need a sign plan waiver at this time. Is everyone agreed with that?
That agreed that we should have him come back.
Have him come back, and he doesn't need a waiver of the sign plan.
Yes.
He'll come back.
Anybody object? Please raise your hand.
Okay.
No, not seeing any objection.
Okay, number 15, detailed plans of paved areas and detailed information about site improvements, including information related to handicapped accessibility, such as surface treatments, grading, spot elevations, railings, etc., shall be submitted to the planning board for review and approval. This was written for another project that had fewer details about paved areas, but I think so I think maybe we'll come back to this one on the 21st, and we should look at the plans to see if they're detailed enough for your approval.
Okay.
And I would just quickly, I would hope that they are, so that we could get rid of this condition so that it's not difficult to interpret down the road.
So we'll look at that. Okay. Number 16, one hard copy and one digital copy of the final revised plans shall be submitted to the planning department. Number 17, this has to do with other use, residential use. The total number of dwelling units to be constructed at the project shall be limited to a maximum of 68 units, 9 studios, 2 one-bedroom units, 1 two-bedroom unit, 7 3-bedroom units, and 49 4-bedroom units. There shall be 1 unit set aside for a resident manager. So this is a question that I have for Kyle. In the 68 units, does that include the unit for the resident manager?
Yes, we took one of the 68 offline and made it a resident manager unit.
Okay. All right. Number 18, the building shall not exceed a maximum of 5 stories and a total of 56 feet 8 inches.
Oh. Chris,
Yeah.
I can't quite do the math quickly enough, but for number 17, those count of units,
Doesn't add up to 68.
well, it should add up to 68, but which type of unit did you take offline, Kyle, for the resident manager?
Let me see. I think it's a 1 bed on the first floor.
I
Okay.
could just make a note that
All right.
there will be 1 unit set aside for a resident
Yeah.
manager, 1 bedroom on the first floor. How's that?
Okay.
Okay. Number 18, the building shall not, I started that. Yeah, the building shall not exceed a maximum of 5 stories and a total of 56 feet 8 inches. And the word feet can come out of there. Measured from average finished grade on the street side of the building to the highest point of the flat roof, excluding any parapet or other rooftop equipment as outlined in section 6.17 of the zoning bylaw. Number 19, question.
Bruce has his hand up, Chris.
I did the math and it adds up, and I thought, well, that's fine. But then I thought the additional blue piece there that says there shall be 1 unit set aside, and Kyle says, well, that's included in the 68. So if you do the math, but you add another one because you read the blue pieces there, then it would add up to 69. So I would say it should say including 1 unit that is set aside for a resident manager, something like that. So you know that the what's
one of the 68 is
yes,
for the resident manager.
make it clear so that people reading this in the future don't wonder whether it's a bad math or
Yep.
what have you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Number 19, the principal use shall remain a private apartment style dormitory and shall not be changed to any other residential use. I think this was put in there because the original planning board that reviewed 57 Olympia Drive was concerned that it could possibly become just a regular apartment building, and that wouldn't be allowed in the RF zoning district.
Mhm.
Number 20, the property shall not be used for temporary, no less than 12-month short-term housing, short-term lodging, or advertised as such in print. And that's a question for Kyle. Is there any reason to think that this might be rented in a different way? And is this a
Oh,
question?
that's fine. That's fine.
That's fine. Okay. Number 21, apartments shall meet all applicable AAB and ADA requirements, with 5% of the total units being fully accessible and all units visitable, including at least 1 accessible unit on the first floor. Is that okay?
I would say I think that's fine. At some point, the AAB and the ADA requirements may shift. So some of those on paper, those may no longer be applicable if those ever go up. So
Or do you want to say all currently applicable?
you could just shorten it to say apartments shall meet all applicable AAB and ADA requirements per the building code at the time of construction. Not a big concern, but just,
In other words, take the 5% out.
yeah, if that changes and becomes more or less down the road.
Just so, in other words, it would read apartments shall meet all applicable AAB and ADA requirements.
At the time of construction.
At that time. Okay, and then scratch the rest of it. Okay. Well, do we want one accessible unit on the first floor?
I assume that's not a requirement of the AAB or ADA?
No, that would be a requirement of yours. I
And
think
there was a
you-
board that, or that maybe in number 57, there was interest in having that?
You made that a requirement of 11 East Pleasant Street. So do you want that to be a requirement here or not?
Kyle, is that a hardship?
I have no problem doing that. That's fine.
So we'll leave that
Okay.
in.
Bruce, you have your hand up?
Yes, I didn't with an elevator. I don't see why it would be important to, why we should care, basically. Why do we care?
Well, I think during 11 East Pleasant, there was some concern that some handicapped folks would just as soon not have to deal with an elevator all the time. So we wanted to have some options for them on a first floor unit.
Okay.
So I guess we'll leave it, Chris.
Okay. Number 22, the units at the project shall be registered and permitted in accordance with the Amherst residential rental property bylaw. Loss or suspension of a rental permit shall constitute a violation of this condition. And then marketing and lease requirements. Number 23, residential leases shall be a minimum duration of 12 months. Is that something that we want to keep in? And does that fit in with Kyle's plan?
Kyle, you say you're good with that, but I know in the recent history when UMass changed its academic calendar, the local landlords had to adjust the end date of some of their leases. So you might end up with an 11-month lease to get back in sync with UMass. Do you want to have that flexibility?
I appreciate that. We ended up with some 13-month leases to accommodate a later move out date. I don't know if we need to get into that.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to bring it up.
Number 24, any substantial modifications of the lease agreement which may impact tenant oversight as determined by the building commissioner, specifically excluding minor updates such as pricing, date modifications, clerical errors, or language updates required by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or other government entities, shall require the applicant to return to the planning board at a public meeting. Okay. Building exterior and site improvements, 25. The applicant shall submit a plan showing bicycle parking and storage to the planning board for review and approval. Well, he's already done that, so I think we can take that out.
Mhm. And it looks like the next one could come out too.
The town engineer and building commissioner shall inspect the construction of the entry driveway. So that just means that, oh, there's no entry driveway. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. Okay.
And there's no on-site paved areas, or yeah, I guess there is. Well,
Sidewalks, but
there's some
I don't think-
sidewalks, yeah.
I don't think the town engineer needs to inspect the sidewalks. All number 27, which is going to change, the number of these are going to change, but all on-site utilities shall be underground.
Bruce?
I'm just thinking, I can't remember the site plan, but I'm thinking there should be some driveways related to access to dumpsters and so forth, wouldn't there be? I'm sorry, I can't remember the plan in my head well enough.
There is a service driveway on the south side of the building.
That's what I
So
thought.
do you want to leave what is shown as 26 in here?
Well, I think that it makes sense because it's a driveway. It's a short one, but
Okay.
Okay. Number 28, all exterior lighting shall be dark sky compliant. exterior lighting shall be downcast, shielded, and shall not shine onto adjacent properties or streets.
All right.
And then completion of work, I think these are boilerplate things having to do with construction, and in the past, we haven't
Yeah, we don't.
chosen to read all of those.
Right. So hopefully we can skip those for tonight.
You could review amenities and management plan.
You want to scroll down?
Yeah.
Pam?
Yes.
Janet, I see your hand.
So I think I'm really speaking out of turn here, but I thought that we should have a requirement of on-site management or staff 24/7. And I think, and that is being satisfied by having a live-in manager plus the reception. And that's been a requirement of the other buildings. And so I thought that the management plan didn't, the management plan, the old management plan doesn't reflect that. And then just the language is really unclear. So I thought we should just say there has to be someone from staff on site all the time. You know, it could be, obviously it could be the receptionist, it could be the live-in manager, it could be anybody, but just to make sure that somebody's there 24/7. And
Any
I'm not,
objections to that, Kyle?
You could add that to 41 there as part of that.
All right.
perfect. And I think the management plan might need some revision because I just found it kind of murky.
So Kyle, do you think you can review that?
I guess I'd ask the question, what was murky on the plan?
Okay, Janet?
Maybe I should just send this to you later because, or send it to Chris. It was just like, I think it meant to say that without just simply saying it. And so maybe I'll just do a quick look at it right now and I can email that to Chris or something later.
Okay, sounds good.
Anyway, we were going to review the amenities section and the management plan section. Number 37, the entire project and building shall be smoke-free, non-smoking to the extent allowed by law. And then the management plan, 38, all move-ins or move-outs shall occur during the hours of 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and shall be coordinated through the leasing office as to lessen the impacts of multiple moving trucks blocking parking or the fire lane. 39, snow plowed within the project shall be promptly removed from the site as part of the clearing process to the extent possible. Number 40, all trash pickup, deliveries, and operation of construction, maintenance, machinery, and landscaping equipment shall be conducted during the hours of 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Exemptions shall include emergency vehicles, snow removal, or other emergency situations as approved by the building commissioner. Number 41, the project shall comply with and be managed in accordance with all the terms of the management plan. Any alterations to this plan shall be approved by the planning board at a public meeting. If the property or business operations are sold, the new owner shall meet with the planning board at a public meeting to review the management plan and to determine if it is still applicable and to decide whether or not to hold a public hearing to review and approve the new management plan. And then we'll make reference to the on-site management 24/7. And then the last one, 42, a demolition permit shall be issued prior to any demolition on the property taking place.
We have two hands, Chris. Bruce?
I appreciate Carl's suggesting we put the on-site resident manager into 41, but I think if it's in the management plan, it's redundant in here, and clearly the management plan is intended that we don't have to put all the details of it into this. We simply refer to the management plan. So I would suggest that the resident manager requirement be handled as Janet is proposing, that any clarity or the specific in the management plan, then we leave it at that.
All right. Andrew?
Thanks, Doug. I was just wondering on item 37, I just don't know what is sort of the latest relative to vaping, and this is sort of calling out non-smoking, but is there any interest in this? Like, should there be some reference to vaping in here as well?
I can't tell you that I have any knowledge about where that stands.
Neither do I. What's it? Kyle dropped. I guess, would this be something that the landlord would typically impose, or this is something the town, I mean, I know we've got it down here for the conditions, but do we request this is this common item in here? And yeah,
I see Kyle has left the meeting.
I mean, we'll come back at this next month anyway, but I'd be curious to know. I mean, 21, it's they're I don't know whether that's just for a healthy environment, whether the majority of these folks can be under 21, kind of the nature of that being in here. But
Chris, do you think you could ask Kyle about his policy with respect to vaping? And we could at least have that answer for the next meeting.
Yes, and is Andrew considering including vaping in this sentence?
It sounds like.
I mean, I'm honestly, I don't know at this point. I mean, I would love to see it out, right? Just dealing with kids at the middle school and high school that are facing this, and it's not. I mean, if the idea of not allowing smoking is to prevent obnoxious fumes, well, vaping will shed obnoxious vapors as well, so it can be just as offensive. I don't know if the health, I don't know enough about the health side of it, but.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll look into that. All right.
Janet?
I found the 517 management plan doesn't have explicitly say it's on-site management. And so I can rewrite that a little bit. Do you want to hear it now, or?
I thought that the new management plan said specifically that there was on-site management.
So it says so the question, it says on-site management is the heading, and says yes, period. Resident on-site manager, apartment on ground floor, management will be staffed at front desk. Property management on call 24 hours a day, lobby entrance, key code secure. And so I thought, I think the other building just is it more clear saying, yes, on-site staffing 24/7 with a resident on-site manager, apartment on ground floor, and management will be staffed at the front desk. So it's a little wordier, but it just doesn't clearly say there's always going to be someone there.
So does Janet have language that she'd like to send me to include?
Yeah, why don't they do that? Because it's yeah, that'd be fine.
Yep.
And then also, I think Rob Morris sometimes likes things in the conditions because he finds it easier to enforce. So I don't know, that kind of cuts against Andrew's argument a little bit. Maybe we could ask Rob that if he'd like to see that in the conditions.
I think it was Bruce that suggested we didn't need it if it was in the management plan.
Okay, Bruce, sorry.
Yeah. It seemed like Kyle was fine with including it at the end of section 41. So
yeah,
why don't we just do that? You all set, Janet?
Yeah.
All right. Chris, your hand is up.
I was just going to say we should include it as a condition. So thanks. We've already decided to do that.
Okay. All right. So that's through the amenities and management plan. Do we need to read any more of these this evening?
I don't think so.
All right, great. We have two attendees in the public, so I wondered whether either of them wanted to make any public comments on this project before we continue the public hearing. And Chris, we will need a date or a time for that on the 21st. I don't see either public attendee raising their hand, so I'll assume there's no comments from them. Could we have a motion to continue this hearing unless anybody wants to say anything else this evening? To December 21st at what time, Chris?
7 o'clock. I would like to know if everybody's going to be here on the 21st. So that's one thing that we should find out.
And Wednesday, the 21st. Andrew, your hand is up, maybe about the motion, but.
Yeah, I was about the motion. I'll move. I was going to move on the motion. I don't know at this point whether I'll be available on the 21st. I assume that I
Does
will.
anybody else have is anybody else questionable, I guess we should say. Tom, your hand is up. You were going to second, right?
I was gonna second, but I have no
Okay.
issues.
So Chris, it seems like the initial response is everybody except Andrew, it seems to think they'll be here, and Andrew doesn't really know.
Okay.
So we should have a quorum.
Chris, can I ask why you're choosing 7 o'clock?
I'm sorry, Pam. I knew you would bring me back to reality.
Okay.
6:35 is good because we don't have any other
Right.
public hearings scheduled for that night.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so Andrew, do you want to make a motion that we continue this hearing to December 21st at 6:35?
I'd be delighted to do so.
All right, and Tom, how about a second?
I will second that.
All right, great. Anybody want to discuss this further this evening? All right, we'll go ahead and vote. Bruce,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Janet,
Aye.
Johanna, Karen,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well. That's unanimous. All right. Thank you all. I guess Kyle has departed. We can't thank him. Time is 9:31 and we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Assuming I can find it. All right, this is old business, item 5. Site plan review 2020-03 with Jonathan Gerfine, Riverside Organics, 555 Belchertown Road. Review of certain changes to the site plan under condition number 7 of SBR 2020-03, including placement of concrete blocks in driveway and parking lot for a marijuana product manufacturer and marijuana micro business under section 3.363.5 of the zoning bylaw, map 18D, parcel 2 in the PRP zoning district. Welcome, Mr. Gerfine. Chris, can you give us the overview and remind us why we're back with Mr. Gerfine? I know we talked about this several months ago and had some recommendations on what he could do with some of these new obstructions, and where do we stand?
Yeah, so if Pam could bring up the, or Nate, bring up the plan that I prepared that shows where the concrete blocks are. And then I will explain that I received an email from a planning board member. I think it was Janet McGowan. And she had driven past the site and had noticed that there were concrete blocks in the driveway. And also, I think the maps would show it best. Yeah. Maybe scroll down. Anyway, she'd noticed that there were concrete blocks in the driveway and also, oh, that's not going to show it. There is an 11 by 17 map that, there it is. Yep. Okay. So there are 2 blocks in the driveway, which is labeled there, 2 blocks. There's a crosswalk right in front of that to the east, I guess. And then when you get down into the fenced in area, there are 10 more blocks, and they're kind of large, and I'm afraid we don't have, I didn't provide pictures this time. I did provide pictures last time, but they're, you know, they're fairly large. They're a little bit like Jersey barriers, but not quite as big as Jersey barriers. So anyway, Janet brought these to my attention, and she said that, you know, they weren't on the site plan when it was originally approved. And that is correct. They weren't on the site plan. So, the building commissioner said, well, you know, Mr. Gerfine can remove these because they weren't on the original site plan, or you can come back to the planning board and talk to the planning board about these changes. And so that's kind of where we are. The planning board did have a discussion last summer about this, and I'm not sure, I don't think Mr. Gerfine was here during that discussion, because Bruce proposed a solution which involved leaving the blocks in the driveway, but putting some sort of wooden slats on them to make them more appealing, make them more visually appealing. But Mr. Gerfine didn't approve that suggestion. And also he wants to leave these blocks in place, the 2 blocks in the driveway and the 10 blocks within the fence. So that's really what I have to report. Janet may have more to report. And then I'm not sure if anybody ever took a site visit here other than Janet and myself. But in any event, that's about all I have to say. So we're here to talk to Mr. Gerfine about whether he really needs to have these blocks here. And if he does, he may need to come back and amend his site plan.
All right. Welcome, Mr. Gerfine.
Hello, good evening.
I guess maybe we should start with an explanation from you about, or a description of what kind of problems you were trying to solve when you installed these blocks.
Okay, so I did not want to spend the extra $3,000 to have them brought in, etc. I don't like them either. They're not so aesthetically, the ones in the property, they're not aesthetically pleasing. I don't like them myself. But the reason I have them is because they're functional. My concern was that people would, by accident, would crash into the greenhouse or would drive over the tight tank, the septic tank, which I have in the ground there. The Department of Environment, the DEP actually very much likes the fact that I have those barriers there to protect the tank from getting driven on. Even though it's an industrial tank that can withstand being driven on, they still like the fact that they're there. The issues that Chris brought up to me originally were that, and the other members of the board, which had dealt with the plan originally, what I believe the concerns were is that the two issues. One, that the dumpster would not be able to be brought to where it needed to be, which it can. It's not an issue for the dumpster. There's plenty of room for the dumpster. The other issue was that someone had mentioned that it blocks or impedes access to the tank, which exactly is not the case at all. And anyone and everyone from the town is welcome to come at any time and inspect and see. It doesn't impede anything. If anything, it's only, they're there to protect the tank from being driven on.
And Mr. Gerfine, I can't tell from the site plan here exactly where the tank is. I assume it's below grade. Is it underneath the driveway paving?
No, sir. It is, if you're driving into the property, it's on the left.
Okay.
Near the door, let's see. Let me try and look real quick and see.
Is it the device at the left-hand end of the building? On the drawing? Is that it?
I'll tell you where it is. If you're outside of the property in the street, there's a little private street there, which is part of the property that I own. If you're in the street looking at the property, so you'll see the line of black You'll see the line depicting the black Jersey barriers. Right? You see those?
Yes.
So to close to the greenhouse, right where that right there, right exactly where the cursor is, right there. That's where the tank is, right there.
Okay,
Move
thank
it
you.
away from the greenhouse, just slightly about 10 feet out. Well, not 10 feet, 10 feet in the scale of the, not the other way, the other way. If you put it back, yeah, a little further out, a little further out, a few more, a little like, yeah, right there. The tank is right there, exactly right there is where the tank is.
Okay,
So the tank, so the issues that Chris originally brought up to me, because she may not remember because she has so many things on her, to deal with, but I do remember because it's the only project I'm dealing with. So the issues were accessibility for the dumpster, which is not a problem. Accessibility to the tank, which it's protecting. The issue was aesthetics was the other issue. Now, just so we're clear, you can't see these blocks unless you purposefully come into the property. So if you were to see them from the street, I would understand why people wouldn't like them or anything. Those are only the ones in the property, which I thought about putting maybe vegetation or hanging plants or something, because honestly, I don't like them either. I really don't. They do not look aesthetically pleasing. They're really there for functionality. I did not want to spend the extra $3,000 to bring them in with a truck and everything else. It was more money I didn't want to spend, but I felt it necessary to protect the tank and the greenhouse, because if someone comes in too fast in the driveway by accident and there's snow or they don't see or they're backing up, I can't afford to have them run into the greenhouse and break the wall down, because I'll be, have a real problem on my hands, with sterility, with safety. It's another issue. Actually, one of the other issues that I thought of having them there and extended them further out toward the gate rather than having them just to protect the tank was for security. So no one can just drive up to the building and crash through the wall saying, oh, let me just, thieves do anything these days. They drive through the wall, think, oh, let me punch a hole in this wall. I'll run in, grab a bunch of merchandise and drive away. So that's another reason why the barriers are there. Now, we can get back to those in a second, but to the ones in the street, Chris might remember that I actually did come to her in the town, not in front of the planning board, but I did request, I did ask permission from her in the town, and she may remember, she may not, this may refresh her memory, that we spoke with one of the town, not the engineers, but one of the gentlemen from the town, I forget his name, who dealt with the streets and what's allowed. And what he basically told me and Chris back a while back is that it's a private road. Most of it belongs to Mr. Gordon Hall, but that little section is my private road, so I could do what I want. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm trying to be argumentative or fighting with the town. I'm just letting you know what was the case. The Jersey barriers out front there, maybe someone else has seen them or not. They're not beautiful. They're not horrible. They're white. I need to put reflective barriers on them for safety in case of snow. I have all that ready to go. The issue is just aesthetics, really. The proposed design from one of the previous board members, I saw it. To be honest, I wasn't crazy about it. It's just more money. It's just wood. I don't know that it would really change the aesthetics to be more pleasing. I think, honestly, if anything, it would just be more of a monstrosity. Now, why did I put the 2 blocks there? You say, okay, why are you putting them there, Jonathan? I'm putting them there because what happens a lot is people will drive into that little street there at all hours of the day and night before I'm there, and they'll park there and they'll eat meals, and then they'll discard all their refuse all over my property. And every few days, literally, I'm cleaning up like a garbage man. And honestly, I don't want to play garbage man every 3 days because people want to throw their Cumberland Farms wrappers and their Dunkin' Donuts wrappers there. So it's really kind of a deterrent is why they're there. The fire trucks need 10 feet. Those are probably 15 to 17 feet apart.
All right, thank you. Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that Mr. Gerfine did state during the public hearing in November of 2019 that he was planning to put cement blocks there. It's in the, let's see, under the public hearing, it's in the third paragraph down. And he stated that the DPW had agreed with his plan to put those concrete blocks there. So the 2 blocks in the driveway were mentioned at the public hearing, and I don't know if the planning board knew what they were going to look like then, but just wanted to make sure that you knew that the planning board had heard that he was going to do that.
All right, but am I correct? It's your opinion that if Mr. Gerfine wants to keep these blocks in their locations, he needs to come back to us at a public hearing with a revised site plan?
I think what he needs to do, he needs to show these blocks on a site plan, these 2 blocks here, because they weren't shown on the site plan, although they were mentioned in the meeting. But he needs to remove the ones that are within the fence, because those are the ones that weren't shown on the site plan and weren't mentioned in the meeting.
Or he could provide a new site plan that includes them.
Yes, and I think the building commissioner, I don't know if he's still here, but I believe the building commissioner thought that he would need to come back with a new site plan application if he wanted to keep those blocks that are within the fence.
Okay. All right, so Nate, I'm going to go to you next.
Sure, thanks. I think this is coming to the planning board to determine if these changes are substantial enough from, a derivation from the site plan that it needs to come back, right? So the building commissioner wasn't willing to say one way or the other. He wanted to come to the board for your review and determination. So the board could determine that these changes are de minimis and not substantial enough to require a new site plan, or you could say that you think they are based on aesthetics, design, or whatever, and want to see a revised site plan. So I really think it's the board's determination whether or not these are a substantial enough change to the site plan that it requires amending it.
Okay, thanks, Nate. Janet.
So the only blocks that I knew about or noticed were the ones that we're looking at right now, the 2 blocks. And I thought they were unsafe because I have driven down that piece of road thinking I was heading towards Valley Medical. It's a little unclear. And so I just thought they would be really easy to drive into in, dusk or, dark and stuff like that. So I don't know if the answer, I don't feel like, pushing through to a whole new site plan. That seems kind of arduous. I didn't know anything about the blocks around the rest of the property. I think somebody else brought that up. Maybe Nate did or somebody, I can't remember now. But I just think those blocks are really hard to see. And so I don't know if just painting them a bright color would help. But I do really think that to me, they seem, they're not attractive, but to me, the issue is I think they're just not safe.
Yeah, no, I agree. If I could just interrupt real quick. I was thinking of painting them white and red for the safety issue. And then I do have 4-foot-high posts that I'm gonna drill into those with reflectors, which will be at 3 feet and 4 feet, for safety reasons. So I totally agree with that comment about safety.
So Mr. Gerfine, it sounds like between the building official and the fact that these 2 blocks here don't show up on the site plan at the moment, are you willing to provide a new site plan and come back for a public hearing?
Well, look, I mean, like the gentleman said, I didn't catch his name. I apologize. I feel the same way. I feel that, making me come back for a whole review of the site plan, is a little bit extreme for what I did there. I mean, what I did, so you just understand, is all, first of all, they're not permanent. These are not permanent structures. They can be moved. They're there for safety. Obviously, I do not want to create any hazardous situation. Just to clarify, there are two different things there. The ones in the street and the ones inside. The ones inside are really there to protect the building from getting driven into by potential thieves. It's there to protect the tank from being driven on, and it's there to protect the greenhouse from anyone sliding or driving or backing into the greenhouse by accident, whatever the case may be, whether it be dark or snowy or what have you.
Okay.
So those are for a safety issue. And they're not seen, they're not in anyone's way, they're not hindering the garbage, and they're not hindering access to the tank, which were the issues that Chris had brought up to me a while back. The ones in the street, if the town wants me to move them, I'll move them. Like I said, do I need them there? No, I put them there for various reasons, as a deterrent for people coming in there, because it's a cannabis facility. Deterrence from coming in, seeing theft, et cetera, right? So it's kind of saying, don't come in. So it's from people to keep them out of there, so they go up to Valley, so they may see, oh, this is not the entrance, go to Valley. For deterring people from parking there and disposing their refuse. I can get rid of them. I mean, it's not like I'm married to these things,
Okay.
But to your question, direct your question, look, obviously if the board requires me, obviously I'd have to come back with a site plan. I think that in all honesty, like the previous gentleman said, that, it might be a little bit extreme for that if we could just figure out how to, how the board is satisfied, the town is satisfied, without the whole review, because the town's busy enough to go through the whole litigious review again. And honestly, I'm almost done. I just want to focus on finishing this thing without having to worry about reviews again, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Chris, if this board decides that all of this is de minimis, would you or Rob in particular object?
I would not object.
And should we consult Rob or not? It sounded like he thought we needed a new site plan if he's leaving the blocks inside the fence.
Yes, he said that last summer, but we can go back and ask him again.
Nate?
If the board is willing to approve this on a site plan, maybe the site plan I drew, Rob
Right.
may be willing to not
Drop
bother
it.
with it.
Nate?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I guess, Jonathan did mention though, we had posts that may be put in, so I might, I would ask for clarification on that. And then, there is, as Jenna mentioned, I do think that people may not realize that the road actually turns left. It's almost a 90-degree turn. And so, in the summer, there was some discussion about, what Bruce had mentioned was, could there be a way to make it clear that this is private property? And so, I guess that's, in my mind, still a question. I know that we would want deliveries and, some cars are coming in here and parking and other things, but, I guess I was curious, Jonathan, when you mentioned, my name's Nate,
Yes, hi,
planner of the
Nate.
town, but when you mentioned the vertical elements, I was wondering, what exactly you mean so, is it?
Right, okay, so basically,
Whoa. I'm just trying to get the parameters and I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to really have a long conversation about this tonight.
Right, but I think, for instance, if the vertical posts are numerous and many, that might change whether this is de minimis or not, in my mind, right? Like, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
right, I'll be very brief if you want to give me 2 seconds.
Go ahead, but.
So they're 4 feet tall, so they'd reach a height of 4 feet tall, 2 on each block, and 4 reflectors on each block, so 2 reflectors on each post.
Do
And
you-
I also have I have actually a very simple farm gate. It's a very simple gate, which I wasn't sure if I was gonna use or not, which I thought about affixing to one of the blocks as just a swing door that would never be locked, that could just easily just be pushed open, just as another way to signify that this is a closed road, that people shouldn't drive down there, et cetera.
So,
Based-
Mr. Gerfine, would you be willing to provide a drawing of what you are proposing to do at this location?
Sure, absolutely.
I would recommend you provide us with a drawing before you do anything,
Sure,
and since we may want to comment on your plan before you do it.
sure.
Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. If I just might interject one thing real quick, I believe that Rob may have taken that position depending on the issues which I mentioned earlier, that the access to the tank, because people on the board thought those blocks hindered the access to the tank to pump it out, which it doesn't. It's only protecting the tank. And the other issue was the garbage, putting a dumpster. That's also not an issue. So those are issues he might have been taking into consideration when he made, saying if it needs to be brought again.
All right, so board members, I think that the decision for tonight is, do we want to have a longer conversation about this with Mr. Gerfine and have him provide some more drawings for review, or do we consider this de minimis and we should not pursue it further? I can see someone is sketching on the screen.
Yes, hi Doug, that's me. So I was just suggesting that if the purpose is to indicate that this is private property, I mean, could there be, more than 4, but say like 6 of those vertical posts with reflectors, right? And
Yeah.
reflective bands. And then a gate in the middle. So, it could be 3 and 3 or whatever, but that way
Right. Yeah.
it really is, it's apparent that this isn't the road.
Right.
I mean, I think right now, I agree that someone could come in and hit these blocks without thinking that they're, going in the roadway.
Yeah,
Not
no,
really.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
anyways,
no,
I'm
I
just,
totally agree.
I'm just throwing an idea out there, like what could be.
Yeah.
Right, and
possibility.
when we talked about this before, Bruce had done a sketch and that seemed like it was too much and, not
Right.
agreeable to Jonathan.
Well, honestly, I think it would have just looked messy. I really do. It wasn't, I just think it would have just been
All right,
I think neighbors would have looked at it, they'd be like, what is this monstrosity? But yeah, what I'll do is I'll draw something up, etc. I can even affix the fence there. It's a very simple fence. It's steel, but it's simple, no locks or anything. So I can set it up actually with the reflectors and the gate and take pictures and bring you actual pictures of what I did. And if the board says, well, change this, paint it that, we don't like them, get rid of them, I'll do that too. Look, I always, want to work with the town. I'm not trying to fight the town. The only reason I have these things there are really for deterrence and safety, like I said.
okay. Andrew?
Thanks, Doug. I'm like reluctant to even say anything, but I mean, doesn't the fence already function as a deterrent for people?
Yeah, but what's happening is this, I'll reiterate again. What's happening is this, in off hours, all times of night, 6 in the morning, in
But
the
that's
evening.
closed, right?
What?
I mean, I'm trying to draw on a.
Yeah, the gate is closed. The gate,
Yeah.
the gate is
So
closed.
it's,
But what happens is, you see where the red car is?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, that's a little dead end street there.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm aware of this. Yeah. I've been here
Right.
before. I go to Valley Medical all the
Okay,
time.
so what happens is all the time is people will come, they'll park there and they'll eat Cumberland Farms and Dunkin' Donuts from up the road.
Yeah.
They eat their breakfast and they literally, in my life, I would never do that because that's not how I was brought up. They take their breakfast and they literally dump it out their window right on my driveway. They're like, here you go, happy birthday. And it's regular, and I'm sick of it. So if I can put deterrents in, it's annoying.
I would say, just for what it's worth, though, the concrete, like, to me, when I see concrete, I think it's an abandoned property. Right. And that may be why people are doing that, is they think that it's
No, they
it's
were doing it
abandoned.
before. They were doing it before. And what happens, they drive in there now still. And I go up to them, people drive, I say, hi, how are you? And I try to be nice about it. I say, look, this is private property, et cetera. I just want to get anyone in the area from the habit of not going in there.
So
It's for all reasons.
since you added the concrete blocks, have the frequency of littering reduced?
I'd say
Have they had any
yes.
impact?
I would say yes, because I think people realize when they see those blocks, they're like, oh, that's not it. And I think that if I put the gate, the farm gate there, which is a nice looking gate, I think if I put, and it just swings either way, I think if I put the gate there with reflectors on there, that would be even more apparent. And then they would be like, okay, they wouldn't drive in there at all. I mean, it wouldn't be locked. It wouldn't be locked. There's no need to have it locked. It's just, like I said, it's just a deterrent. It really is just a deterrent.
Okay, Karen?
I agree with Andrew. Those concrete blocks do make it, as you said, they're aesthetically so unpleasing, and yet they're far apart. They look like something that got dropped there and is out of place. And if it was me, I just go there and park and think, well, this is kind of a dump. I think if you put in a garbage, if you put in a gate and put in some signs that say private property, and even those little red marks that Nate put in there, that 4 of them are already a relief, because it says, okay, this is the end, don't enter here. But the blocks standing alone won't do that. So I'm looking forward to your drawing of putting on the reflectors and the gate. I think that will improve it.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to affix them. I'm going to affix everything and take a picture and then give you the actual picture instead of just a drawn picture. And you folks can take a look at it and see if it's okay with you.
All right.
Does that sound like a plan?
Anybody object to that? We'll have Mr. Gerfine come back in a month or something. Andrew?
I'm just, why not draw it up and make sure we're good before you actually build it?
Oh, because it would only take me a half hour to put these things on. I mean, it's just a matter of drilling the metal into it. To take it apart, it would take me 10 minutes. To put it together, it would take me probably 10 minutes. It's not like, because look, to actually see what the end product is and just seeing a drawn sketch, obviously would be, to see the actual product, I think would be, a little. And if I'm going to be coming back to you folks in a month, I guess, it wouldn't make a difference.
All right, Chris, why don't we put Mr. Gerfine on the agenda
For December 21st?
Yeah, if we've got room.
Well, so far, all you have is Archipelago that night.
Okay, and we've been through most of that. Nate?
Yeah, so what I was just showing was the, here's an aerial image with the property boundary. And so I think it's just the road layout is confusing, right? Because of the turn here. But I guess I'm confused, these posts you're talking about, these reflective posts, you're going to drill them into and then set them on top of the concrete blocks, right? So they're going to be like 6 feet tall on top of the blocks.
No, they're going to be drilled into the front.
All right, yeah, I guess we can wait to see. I was thinking about, in my drawing, was actually having bollards that you core through the through the asphalt, and you have them in the road, and you remove the blocks. You just have some posts with a gate.
Oh, that's a whole nother. I'd have to drill and cost and buy, and that'd be a whole another.
I mean, this whole project is, I mean, the whole thing is a project. And so
No, I
think the
understand
concern
that.
is that the planning board heard a complaint, and it's, it's not only is it about aesthetics, it's about safety and everything. And so I think, I guess we can wait to see the drawing, and then it's the board's decision as to how they want to proceed. But it could be that they recommend other solutions than what the drawing might show or the image might show.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Nate. You are taking a risk by doing anything further without a drawing that shows what you want to do. But if it's only a half an hour and you don't mind
No, look, it's
putting a
not.
hole in your concrete blocks, then
No, it's not a big deal. It's not. It's like, it's not a big deal to put them on or to show you folks what it actually would be and to take them off or whatever the case may be.
all right. So why don't we just plan to see Mr. Gerfine in another month? And thank you for your patience this evening. And
Oh, no problem.
took us a while to get to you.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. All right. So the time now is 10:05. And I don't see that we have any other old business, Chris. Is that correct?
No other old business.
All right. Any new business?
Can't think of anything.
About Form A&R subdivision
No Form As. No.
ZBA applications?
No, sir,
Was that a no?
that was a no. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. How about SPP, SPR, SUBs?
Nothing that we haven't told you about already.
Okay. Moving on to Planning Board Committee and Liaison reports. Bruce, have you succeeded in getting on the PVPC yet?
No, not yet. Although not for want of trying on Chris's part. But I haven't seen anything from Jack, so I imagine that there has been no meeting, and that's my report.
Okay. Andrew, CPAC?
Thanks, Doug. We had a meeting last Thursday. We got the 4 community housing presentations. Another meeting tomorrow night, and then one the week after. So moving along, keep it again. If you have any questions, the community housing portion is done. If you have any questions relative to historic preservation or open space or rec, feel free to flip them over. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Tom?
Nothing to report since our last meeting.
All right, Janet?
I frankly can't really remember what we talked about at the last solar bylaw working group, but I was gonna, I sent out the state's 2025, 2030 plan for reducing carbon. And there's another plan that will be coming down the pike for how to reach the 2050 goals. So anyway, the 2025, 2030 plan is really long, but Martha Hanner on the solar bylaw working group has a presentation on it with some nice PowerPoint things. And it's really useful to sort of see what the state's strategy and plan is for carbon reductions and alternative energies. And so she is willing to come to the planning board and present that. It takes about 20 minutes, and I think it will give a good context to the planning board when we get the solar bylaw, which is, being drafted at this moment.
Have there been any drafts circulated or posted on your committee's website?
Well, we're doing kind of like a first pass, like the planning department just did a purposes statement. And as they go through sections, we're going to look at them, but we haven't done the community outreach part to determine community values. So it's kind of like a first pass, and then, a deeper pass in 2023. I could circulate like the Cape Cod Planning Commission draft or the PVPA draft, which gives a really good background in the choices that have to be made. So
okay, well, I think I've at least seen the Cape Cod information and also the PVPC information. So it doesn't sound like you really have anything new yet.
Yeah, so if people are interested in Martha's presentation, she could do it in December or January. She's
Okay.
done it, she's given it to different groups as well as us, like she's been talking to different precincts.
And
Districts.
Chris, I know you circulated the link to tomorrow night's briefing for the ZBA on solar bylaw issues, and so everybody's invited to that too. Chris?
Just that it's the attorney from KP Law who's going to give the Zoning Board of Appeals training on what they can and can't require of a solar array, because they have a few that are coming through the pipeline. And they also have a battery project that's coming through the pipeline. So yeah, so that's what that's all about. And I've only heard from 3 planning board members who thought they might want to come. So I didn't post it as a planning board meeting. So if you do come, I'm happy to have you there, but don't engage in too much conversation about it. Okay.
Okay. And Chris, should we take Janet's, the woman from the state up on doing the 20-minute briefing?
Martha's a member of the solar bylaw working group and a retired NASA astrophysicist. She's quite dynamic. But
Would
she's
that,
somebody-
would
she's
that be
somebody-
something we can maybe put on the agenda in early January?
I think January would work best. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so let's try to do that. Johanna,
Janet talking about the solar bylaw reminded me that I ran into Alan Snow, the tree warden, today, and he mentioned something about a new tree ordinance and something about the town wanting to put forward a concerted effort to protect large mature shade trees in town. He was talking to me in the context of like on the plant, like, oh, you're on the planning board. You should be thinking about this as you're thinking about the solar bylaw. So I guess, Chris, he had mentioned that he brought it to you. I don't know if it's I don't know if now is the point to address it, but I was just curious where that's at and how much it extends and overlaps with our purview.
Chris?
They brought it to me a few years ago when it was in a very early stage. So I haven't seen it recently, but I could reach out to Alan and ask him about that and ask him if it's something that he would like to present to the planning board.
Okay. All right, thank you, Janet. And that leaves Chris for CRC. Anything you want to share?
The CRC is going to be looking at the food and drink bylaw tomorrow with Nate and me. They were waiting until the planning board made its recommendation before they closed their public hearing and made their recommendation. So we're going to be reporting to them about your action tonight. And they have, like you did, they recommended the flood map zoning bylaw and the firm maps and the whole package having to do with flood maps. I guess that was at their last meeting. So that's all.
Okay. All right. No report from the chair this evening. Any report from staff?
No report from staff.
All right. Time is 10 or 12 minutes after 10, and I think we can adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thank you for another 3.5+ hour meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Goodbye.
Recording stopped.
Recording. Stop recording.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.